Okay, now let me just see if I can get this straight. You come from another planet, and you're mortal there, but you're immortal here until you kill all the guys from there who have come here, and then you're mortal here unless you go back there, or some more guys from there come here, in which case you become immortal here again.
Something like that.
It's a weird franchise.
I can't make heads or tails of it. Greetings, friends. Welcome to Critically Acclaimed, the film review podcast where highbrow and lowbrow collide. Right in the middle of your face.
That's highbrow and lowbrow colliding.
Like a monster truck rally.
Oh, yeah!
Welcome to Critically Acclaimed.
Sunday!
$20 gets you the whole seat, but you'll only need the edge. My name is Witney Seibold. I am a film critic for the internet, and I don't have a cool nickname.
My name is William Bibbiani. I'm a film critic for the internet as well, and I do have a cool nickname. It's Bibbs!
Which is what we wore in the snow.
This week on Critically Acclaimed, we have no new movies to review, which is kind of a refreshing change of pace.
It's the last week of the year. We're recording this on the very last day of the year.
Yeah.
By the time you hear this, it will probably be the first day of your year. So,
or the last day of the year, or whenever you listen to it.
I suppose so. But greetings, future. We are here in the past, where things are still kind of okay.
No, they're not. Seriously horrible. What are you talking about?
And to celebrate, actually, the horror of this year, one of our features this week is going to be the worst films we saw in 2017.
Now, I think a lot of people, want to stay really positive in their film criticism.
Screw those guys.
No, I get it. I do. Like, the world's on fire, and it's nice to be sort of supportive and positive. And when we highlight our worst films of the year, we're not just taking cheap shots. We're trying to focus on mistakes that were made, how we can not make those mistakes anymore, and also just to make sure people understand how much a bad movie can hurt you, so that you can avoid them in the future, and you can not make them in the future.
Also, a long list of bitching does do a lot to sort of cleanse and purify a little bit.
Well, we want to have, fair reactions to things, but it's fair to say when someone hurts you. Like, if someone bullies you and you say, you were a jerk to me, it really hurt, let me explain to you all the horrible things that you put me through, that's a fair reaction. And some movies are very oppressive when you just have to sit with them in a theater.
Also, we're critics. It's our job to sift out the good and cut out all of the chaff.
Or at least explain why it's chaff.
Yeah, so if we're not focusing on the negative from time to time, and we're not writing negative reviews from time to time, then we're not doing our jobs correctly.
Or we have just no taste and we like everything. And that's not good.
And if you like everything, you're not a very useful critic, are you?
Liking everything as a critic is just as useless as hating everything. And I think we all sort of don't particularly care for criticism where everyone just hates everything all the time. It gets tiresome real quick.
Yeah, the whole cranky critic phenomenon.
Yeah, and I get it, but you want to show that you're a full human being with a wide range of emotions and tastes and responses. And we spent all last week talking about the best movies of the year, and we fell in love with a lot of movies last year. It was a really good year for movies in a lot of ways. And then there's also this. So in addition to the worst movies of the year, which we'll tackle in the second half of the podcast, it is the last week of the month. And on the last week of the month, here at Critically Acclaimed, we review an entire franchise of films as selected by the fans over at the Schmoville Facebook page.
That's right.
And this particular month, y'all chose Highlander.
There can be only one, or six, as it turns out.
It's like the Final Fantasy franchise. How final can it be? you keep making more. Why do you keep making more?
And despite the now, I know that Highlander, there were, I think, 3 movies and then a TV series.
I think so, yeah.
I think there were 3 movies. Then there was a spin-off TV series about a different character with the same qualities.
Which only took the first film as canon, but even then it changed the ending.
Yeah. And the TV series lasted 6 seasons.
1992 to 1998.
It was lasted a long time, and there were 2 spin-off TV series as well.
Well, there was one spin-off TV series, and then there was an animated series that was its own thing.
I count that. I count that as a spin-off.
But it's not a spin-off because it predates the live-action series.
Oh, okay, never mind.
There was a Saturday morning cartoon series that was Highlander the Animated Series, which was about Quentin MacLeod.
Well,
who
film
killed
series,
people in the future.
The film series starts out being about Connor MacLeod,
as played by Christopher Lambert.
The TV series is about Duncan MacLeod.
Duncan MacLeod, who was his cousin, I think.
I'm not exact. They weren't blood related. He was inducted into the MacLeod clan.
No, I think you're thinking about the anime series.
Oh, maybe so.
Okay, I want to make one thing really clear.
Anime film.
There is an anime film. I want to make one thing really clear. When we review the whole Highlander franchise, we're not reviewing the show. Now, I know that might be frustrating. That's 6 seasons of television you wanted us to get through this month. That's a lot. One thing that's interesting about the Highlander movie franchise is that, for the most part, it operates completely independently of not just the TV series, but itself. And every single movie
sequel has new rules, and it's really difficult to follow.
So, they acknowledge that you don't know anything about it because they don't know anything about it. Only the last live-action film in the series has what I might consider continuity. But then I think it's really entrenched in the series, and it's hard to follow.
Well, yeah, there were the 3 movies. There was the series. Then there were 2. Then there was a movie which crossed over the films and the TV series.
Yep.
Then there was a film just based on the TV series, but kind of took some of the continuity from the previous film.
Well, so did the series.
No, plot beats and characters.
Yeah.
And then there was an anime film, which was a separate and sealed off.
The anime film, it takes place in the distant future, so much so that it really could be in continuity with any of these. And it takes place with different characters, so it's kind of free to do its own thing, whereas the others get kind of trapped in a miasma of continuity problems. But let's just focus on one at a time.
All right, well, let's try to set out the mythology first of all, because it's really confusing.
Well, I think that's the problem. I think we should take that film by film.
Okay.
Because the mythology changes in most of the films.
The first Highlander came out in 1986, and it was directed by Russell Mulcahy, who's a really prolific genre director. He's done a lot of really terrific movies, including the sequel, strangely enough.
He came out for Highlander II, The Quickening.
It stars Christopher Lambert as Connor MacLeod, who is a Highlander. He's a Scotsman who discovers, after being stabbed, that he cannot die. Yeah. And he is ousted from his village and goes wandering out in the woods, where he runs into Ramirez, played by Sean Connery.
Yeah, Sean Connery plays a Spaniard.
So we have Christopher
wielding a samurai sword.
Christopher Lambert is playing a Scot, and a Scottish actor is playing a Spaniard. Good job.
You had one job.
There's also, and Ramirez reveals, what's going on with him. It turns out he is part of this long line of immortals. He was born immortal, and...
Well, no, he's not born immortal. What happens is you grow older until you are killed. And then your aging stops.
I thought you just reached a certain age and your aging stopped.
Well, because Sean Connery is significantly older than Christopher Lambert. You keep growing older until you die a unnatural, violent death. Later on in the series, they explain that if you die of old age,
that's right.
without being stabbed, murdered, poisoned, drowned, whatever, you just die. That's what happens. So you have to. It's you have to be activated. So if you die,
that's right. That was a plot point in the 5th movie. 4th or 5th, where he stabbed his wife and activated her powers, and she was really bitter about that. That was the 4th movie.
Yeah, so that's how that works. So once you get killed, from that point on, you're immortal. You will never age past that day, except in later sequels when we're not going to worry too much about the makeup budget. But I digress. But the thing is that you can technically die. The only way you can die is if someone cuts your head off.
Through the neck.
Yeah, that's and they'll play with that a little bit, and we'll talk about why that makes no sense later. But so you cut your head off, and then if another immortal cuts your head off, there is what is called a quickening, and all the energy that was trapped up in your body gets released in a shower of
dragon light,
of painted on 1980s electricity, which is my favorite electricity.
I love that animated electricity. It looks better than any other kind of electricity.
I think it does. Like the 1980s blue hand painted onto the cell electricity is one of two things that I just absolutely love about 80s movies. Is that and sparks. Shit sparked more in the 80s.
Like explosions were like big spark balls.
Yeah, it wasn't just like boom. It wasn't
like fire. It was sparks.
Yeah. Like there's a great the opening fight scene in Highlander is really, really cool, and it takes place. It's a sword fight in a parking garage, and we'll talk about that in a minute because I actually love the way this movie opens. But like every time they hit a car with a sword, showers of sparks. Like they just hit like a huge ball of fireworks. Just
every car is made of flint.
Yeah, it looks really neat. So then that is called the quickening, that energy, and that is absorbed by the immortal that just killed another immortal, and then they become more powerful?
I'm not sure if they become like physically stronger, although in the third movie you also like gain their knowledge.
That's what is made explicit in the third movie, that if you kill an immortal, you gain all of their knowledge and their expertise, which I always assumed was the case, but they never talked about it. Like, that's the thing that makes sense to me, because they're immortal, they're learning all this information, they're gaining all these skills. That would be the thing, and a reason to want to kill them.
When Ramirez is explaining the quickening to Connor, he explains it as just sort of like like an adrenaline rush. Just any kind of adrenaline rush is a quickening. So like they're jumping off a cliff. It's like, wow, this is the quickening too. So I didn't have to cut anybody's head off, and I can still get a quickening.
You can just jump off a cliff. This is awesome.
And they're immortal. Oh, well, we'll be broken down at the bottom for a couple months, but you just get up and you're okay.
Now, the thing with the immortals is that, supposedly, and I don't know who told them this originally, but there can be only one at the end. And at some point, there will be what is called the Gathering. And all the immortals that are left, which by that point will be relatively few.
They kind of like psychically know that this is happening, and they all kind of drift to the same location.
Right, and they're going to fight and fight and fight until there's only one of them left, and the only one who wins will get the prize. And the prize isn't explicitly revealed until the end of Highlander, and then in the sequels it changes.
Turns out it's one of those ninja blenders. You get a prize. It was like some lame prize. You get a new pair of boots.
They're +1 to healing.
I've been around 2,000 years. I've murdered thousands of people. I get a pair of boots.
They're really nice.
You got a cloak of invisibility.
You're the one who assumed it would be cool. We just said it was a prize.
It's not really stated what the prize really is. I don't think ever, but the implication is that you get a wish.
I think it feels like Dragon Ball to me. In the first film, and we'll talk more in detail about how the films work, but we're just talking about the mythology right now. In the first film, Connor wins the prize, and he becomes like kind of a god. He becomes he's mortal now, but he's interconnected. He's connected to all of nature and every mind on the earth, and he can sort of influence the world to be a better place. That's the implication.
I thought that was part of his wish, that he was like good in his heart, so he wished for, the world to be a better place just in general.
Maybe.
And also part of his wish was that he wanted the privilege of finally growing old and dying, although you don't necessarily have to choose that as part of your prize.
I don't know. In the second film...
Again, it's not really made explicit.
In the second film, a couple other immortals show up. Connor McLeod immediately kills them, and then he's the one, and he wins the prize again, because there are only two others.
Yeah.
And he uses that to resurrect Ramirez. That was his new wish.
That wasn't the way Ramirez...
He just yelled Ramirez, and then Ramirez is resurrected.
Because they went through like that slime hand ceremony back on their home planet. We'll get to that. They went through the slime hand ceremony on their home planet, and he said, and now that we've done this weird thing, now you can just resurrect me by calling my name.
Why didn't he do that the centuries? He missed him for centuries.
I guess it was just important in that moment. Maybe he needed to be doing a quickening at that moment.
He did a bunch of quickenings. We find out in like the fourth film that Connor's killed like 200 immortals by this point.
He forgot. He forgot until that moment. It slipped his mind. Oh, right, the slime hand thing back on our home planet.
Whoops.
But I think it's also explained in the second movie that their memories were erased or some such thing. So maybe it just came back to him because in the second movie, he killed guys who are like fresh from his home planet.
Yeah, like Birdman on hoverboards. Yeah, and
Porcupine Birdman.
But even before that, he just happened to be watching the Götterdämmerung, and he was just like, "Oh right, I'm from another planet." Like, that's it. That's the opening scene of Highlander 2.
So Wagner has that power.
Wagner was clearly an immortal.
Listen to Richard Wagner.
Let's talk about the actual movies.
Well, we're trying.
No, let's get through them one at a time, because it's hard enough as it is. Right. The first Highlander came out in 1986. And it's... I would describe this movie as a jumble of, like, sort of Celtic chant album covers and heavy metal album covers. Like, they just sort of shove them together randomly.
You kind of have that medieval in the modern time stuff, but then you also have just the medieval time stuff.
Because it constantly cuts from the present day at the time, the mid-1980s. It's the time of the gathering. Connor is one of the few immortals left, and they're all converging on New York to chop each other's heads off, and one of them will become a god, basically. Meanwhile, we're getting all of these flashbacks to the Scottish Highlands, for the most part. We get a few in World War II, a couple in, like, colonial America, but...
There's the Barry Lyndon sequence.
Love the Barry Lyndon. That's the best part of the movie. There's this one bit where someone was just like, hey, remember that time you got really drunk in, like, the 1800s?
Challenged a guy to a rapier duel?
Yeah, the guy just keeps... Connor's just completely drunk, and the guy just stabs him, and Connor dies, and he's like, well, I have won the duel. And then Connor gets up. Stab! I won the duel!
Keep stabbing him in the midsection. And one of his buddies is like, these are swords. He could take your head off. These are rapiers. Nobody can take a head off with a rapier. I'm good. I'm fine. It's like sparring with bushes.
It's important to remember, like, I think nowadays, Highlander, even though it's a weird mythology, I think everyone's kind of got the gist of it. When you think about, like, what it must have been like to read this script blind, or to watch it without really knowing what it's about, it's structured so weird. There kind of wasn't anything like it, and you kind of have to admire the audacity of it. It opens with a huge fuck-off wrestling match, and they filmed the shit out of it. They got a giant crane flying over everything. It's the best shot wrestling match I've ever seen in my life. And then Christopher Lambert, it's kind of like that shot in Strangers on a Train where everyone at the tennis match is looking left and right, and right. But then Bruno Anthony is only looking at Farley Granger, and it's a really creepy image because he's not... Everyone else in the crowd is looking at what he isn't looking at. So it's kind of like that, but Christopher Lambert just looks emo as fuck. And then he leaves and goes into the parking garage where a guy who looks like a badass Christopher Plummer, like, walks out in, like, a suit and sunglasses.
So Christopher Plummer.
Basically. It's not actually Christopher Plummer, but I always thought it was. It looks like him. And they just sort of meet in a parking garage, and then they whip out swords, and they start fighting, and this old guy who looks like he's at least in his 50s starts doing 100 backflips down a hallway, and they start chopping up cars and everything, and then Christopher Lambert finally chops the dude's heads off. Dude explodes in lightning, cars explode everywhere, and you gotta remember, there was a time when you had no idea what the fuck was going on. This is a weird way to open a movie, and then it cuts to Scotland in the Middle Ages. Well, I mean, really interesting opening for a movie.
That's a good cold open. You're presented with this mystery, and then you go to the past to sort of figure it out, and you're intrigued.
But it's the distant past. How does this connect? Oh my god, this guy was alive in Scotland? Like, I really love the first film in a vacuum because it's just bizarre. Once you start elaborating on the mythology...
out of a vacuum.
But my point is that once you start elaborating on the mythology, it gets kind of stupid. Like, you kind of just want to look at it on the surface and appreciate it on the surface on how crazy it is.
And eventually, it's explained, as we said, he runs into Ramirez. Ramirez explains everything to him. He gets married after he's been ousted from his village for being immortal.
They assume he's a demon. It's really sad.
And he marries a woman, and she ages into somebody with very bad makeup and says, I always knew that you were an immortal because, well, I noticed you weren't aging at one point.
That's the other thing I forgot. Immortals can't have children.
That's right.
So she wanted to have babies, and he can't.
Sterile.
Yeah, and it's awkward. So that's all super sad.
And we also run into a character in the past called the Kurgan.
The Kurgan is one of my favorite 1980s movie villains, which is saying something. First off, he's played by Clancy Brown, who is one of our more underappreciated character actors. You've loved him in everything you've seen him in. There's a decent chance you don't know what his name was. Clancy Brown, he was the drill instructor from Starship Troopers.
He was in Buckaroo Banzai.
He was in Buckaroo Banzai. He was the voice of Lex Luthor in Superman the Animated Series. He was the bad guy, like the Punisher's bad guy in season 2 of Daredevil.
Okay.
You know Clancy Brown.
He played the big villainous Cloud in the Green Lantern movie. Like, they did motion capture on his face and they distorted his voice, so it doesn't matter, really, but of course they did. That was him.
Thanks, Clancy. Clancy Brown is the shit, and I love Clancy Brown, and I love him in this performance, because in the past, he's just this huge barbarian in this amazing suit of bone armor, where it looks like they've got, like, a saber-toothed tiger head as his helmet. It looks really, really cool, and he's the one who, he knows Connor's going to be an immortal, and he's trying to kill Connor on the battlefield, but he's unable to finish the job, so he's hunting for Connor. Ramirez finds Connor, warns him that the Kurgan, who's like already the most powerful of the immortals, he's been killing people for thousands of years, is on the hunt for him, and he's trying to train Connor to help kill the Kurgan.
Why is he called the Kurgan? What is a Kurgan?
I don't know. They never explained that.
Like, I looked up the word, and I'm not sure exactly what it means.
He's just a cool sounding name. Doesn't Kurgan sound like a metal band? Like, opening for like Whitesnake, Kurgan.
Kurgan, Crocus, and
Anvil.
Sure, that's a great triple bill.
Oh my god, right? Kurgan's opening, of course. No one remembers Kurgan terribly well.
Kurgan would be the opener.
Yeah, Kurgan's the one getting the big break.
Kurgan is now opening for Anvil.
That feels like justice. If you've never seen Anvil, the story of Anvil, it's one of the best music documentaries I've ever seen. It's just this awesome heavy metal band that influenced all the heavy metal bands everyone liked, but never made it big.
And people theorized it's merely because they were Canadian. Like, they were too Canadian for their own good, and that's why they never made it big.
Maybe that's the case.
But they were big in Japan.
So Ramirez trains Connor, and then there's this amazing fight where the Kurgan finds Connor McLeod's small castle that he's found for himself. Moved
into an abandoned castle.
Yeah, which I don't know how he afforded that. I guess maybe it's haunted.
We're from Europe. We each got a castle each. We're up to here with effing castles.
Another fucking castle. So the Kurgan tracks Connor down, but Connor was out that day? They never explain it. He just wasn't around.
You don't stay in your castle all day. Come on.
It was the middle of the night.
Get castle fever.
Ramirez is there with Connor's wife. The Kurgan shows up, and there's an amazingly cool fight where Connor
in a broken castle with lightning flashing in the background.
Oh yeah,
it looks like a novel cover.
It looks amazing. Sean Connery and Clancy Brown are fighting each other up these stone steps that wind up like a tall spire.
The interior of a spire.
And every time, like, one of their swords hits the wall, like, boulders fall off of it until, like, the entire top of the castle is destroyed and there's lightning everywhere, and it's really cool. Like, it's just absurdly cool. I've always loved that bit.
And then the Kurgan kills Ramirez.
Yes, he does. And it's fucked up.
Fast forward to the present, the Kurgan's still around.
Yeah.
And he's still Clancy Brown, and he's still growly. He's still got a big scar on his neck.
Well, he's got a scar on his neck because Ramirez almost took his head off and didn't succeed, but he did manage to permanently fuck up the Kurgan's vocal cords. So now he talks like this.
Which I imagine
makes him sound scarier. Thanks, Kurt. Thanks, Ramirez. You fucked up.
There's some sort of, like, demonic angelic thing going on with the Immortals because they're not allowed to fight on hallowed ground, so they can't fight in churches or cemeteries.
It's interesting because they say it's a rule, not so much like a paranormal compulsion or anything where, like, they physically can't. It'd be kind of cool if it was. It's just like the one thing they've all agreed, okay. If you ever need a break, you can go to hallowed ground. And everyone will just be like, oh, okay, that's fair.
Neutral space, it's all right.
But the only reason they really have that, is so that there can be a scene with Connor and the Kurgan later where they talk.
Yeah.
As opposed to just run at each other. I guarantee you that's where this comes from.
And where the Kurgan can, like, waggle his tongue at nuns.
Yeah, it's really just... he just comes in, he starts slapping out all the candles people have lit for all their family. And he starts, like... yelling at nuns and like,
hey baby, want to get back in the hat? No, I'm not gonna say it. That's stupid.
And this Clancy Brown just gets to overact like a maniac.
Meanwhile, there is a love interest for Connor,
a contemporary
love interest who is a cop and also freelance metallurgist.
She is a forensic police specialist, and she is analyzing the shards of metal left over from the sword fight, and she has a background in the history of metallurgy.
Now, to make it work visually in the film, they give us actual pieces of metal that we can she can pull
shavings.
Not even a shaving. It's like this gigantic, almost pizza slice shaped little piece of metal.
Yeah.
If you hit a car with a sword and you leave a chunk of metal that size, you throw that sword away.
That's a shit sword.
That's a crap sword.
Yeah. There's a thing
but these people are the Immortals have their prize collection of swords, and in fact, you can go to comic book conventions now and get those swords.
You can get replicas of Highlander swords.
The Highlander swords are really, really hot ticket items.
They're cool. They're cool looking swords.
Comic book conventions.
So she has discovered that one of the swords that was used in the fight where a guy got beheaded, and of course nowadays you can't just behead someone and not attract attention. Back in the day it was easy. Oh, that guy's missing a head. You'd imagine.
What are you talking about? I beheaded 4 people this week.
Yeah.
Nobody's beating my door down.
She discovers that one of the swords used was folded 2,000 times, which is a thing that couldn't be done. I'm taking your word for it, Highlander.
It would have to be in constant use for centuries.
Yeah, and it turns out it's actually one that Ramirez had made for him in 2000 BC, which will be important in the third film.
Look, I know you have sentimental attachment to your sword, and swords are very big because if you're going to take somebody's head off, you're going to want a sword. Now,
it's going to be the weapon of choice.
I would eventually switch to those big scissors from Exorcist 3.
Yeah, but you can't, you got to sneak up on someone with those. You can't just, get in a fight.
Just be a sneaky immortal. You don't have to get in a fight with somebody. Why do you got to fight them? You just say, I'm going to cut your head off. No, just
what you need is one of those flying guillotines.
Oh, there you go.
You need to master the flying guillotine.
One of those big razor yo-yos.
Yeah, those are cool.
Yeah.
Problem solved.
Like an Octopussy.
Yeah. Or Master of the Flying Guillotine.
I like Octopussy better.
I like Master. Have you seen Master of the Flying Guillotine? It's amazing.
I've seen half of it. I never finished it.
It's super cool. If every kind of fighting video game cliche comes from Master of the Flying Guillotine for the most part. Like Street Fighter, half the characters come from Master of the Flying Guillotine. It's insane. So she's trying to track down the sword. Connor McLeod has now been over the centuries, he's been bequeathing his fortune to children who died at birth and then taking over their identity. And so he's now owns an antique shop, which I guess is mostly just stuff he's collected over the years. It's a good business.
I've been amassing all this stuff. May as well start selling it.
And she tracks Connor down. Connor is, of course, the prime suspect in the decapitation murder. And they fall in love, of course.
They fall in love to Queen. And we haven't addressed Queen
yet.
No,
we haven't addressed Queen yet.
Just like Flash Gordon, this movie becomes maybe 12 times better with the inclusion of Queen on the soundtrack.
Yeah, and this isn't just one of those soundtracks where they got a bunch of cool songs. Queen composed new songs, multiple new songs for the Highlander soundtrack, and that includes,
sadly, it never became a record. It actually became a Queen record.
Yeah, they just released it as a Queen record. It's kind of like the Maximum Overdrive soundtrack, which kind of just was its own AC/DC record. But some of the biggest, most popular Queen songs were written for Highlander, of all fucking things. Who Wants to Live Forever? Fucking It's a Kind of Magic. Princes of the Universe is one of the most badass songs ever written. Queen is a band that I really, really hope the younger listeners know, and don't just know a couple of songs of. You need to absorb Queen.
The discography of Queen.
The most epic band possibly ever. Yeah, I've heard Led Zeppelin. I'm picking Queen.
Queen is a heck of a lot more fun. They're a lot more interesting. Freddie Mercury had one of the best voices imaginable.
They're musically dynamic. They're doing really fascinating things with harmonies.
I'm not sure if you've seen pictures of Freddie Mercury, but he had sort of his teeth stuck out a little bit. And he acknowledged that. He had kind of buck teeth. And he refused to get his teeth fixed because he thought that would affect his voice too much.
Nice. Good for him.
His voice was too pure the way it was.
There's a great music video. I want to say it's for Princess of the Universe, but there's a great Highlander music video, and which includes all too briefly, it should have been the whole music video, Freddie Mercury fighting Christopher Lambert. Christopher Lambert has a sword. Freddie Mercury is using his mic stand.
That is beautiful.
It's fucking awesome.
Speaking of immortals, a drink out for Freddie Mercury. Freddie Mercury.
Thank you. Pour one out.
And Brian May and the 8 other Brian May guitars.
And there's all this other weird shit in Highlander we're not even addressing. The Punisher shows up, basically. There's a guy who's just a vigilante
guy.
wandering the streets of New York, wanders into the Kurgan, killing an immortal, tries to kill him. Kurgan stabs him in front of a bunch of other people, then carjacks a vehicle with an old lady in the side and, like, throws her over the hood as he drives around like a maniac. Like, it's just every random thing. But it kind of works in this one because it just has this almost juvenile masculine energy to it.
It has, this really balls to the wall. Masculine is a great word. This just very little boy power fantasy sort of thing going on in this one.
To the extent
a lot of just fun sword fighting. What do we have to do to get sword fighting in the modern day?
That's fun. It's a damn shame that the female protagonist, whose name escapes me right now, she gets to be smart and capable and, of course, kidnapped at the end and ultimately do nothing to affect the plot. Meanwhile, Connor's wife is this wilting flower who, of course, gets sexually assaulted by the Kurgan, and that's an important plot point. And the only other woman that there was two other women that we see. One of them was a victim that Connor saved in World War II, who now works for him and is his loyal girl Friday. And the other was Connor's first girlfriend, who immediately turned on him when he was a demon. It's a shame that it takes until the fourth movie
to have our first female,
like really
immortal,
female immortal, or just really great female character. Like, they keep dancing around it. They'll introduce a female character who seems kind of cool. She's a revolutionary, and then she immediately gives everything, just seeds the floor to Connor so that he can do everything. And Deborah Kara Unger is basically a ripoff of the protagonist in the first one in the third film, and it's a damn shame.
Only this time she's like reincarnated because she plays a past version of herself.
Like, whatever. One. Like, it's we're overdue for a stronger female character in this franchise, in the movie franchise. I know there was some in the show.
There's been talk of a remake of this one. Maybe we'll just have a female lead in that one.
That would be cool.
That would be great.
So it ends in a huge fight between the Kurgan and Connor McLeod. It's pretty badass. Takes place against like a huge neon sign. The ceiling gets the roof gets flooded and the floor collapses. And the water doesn't go anywhere, which is weird.
Russell McKay has not met a single plume of urban steam that he hasn't wanted to furiously backlight with like some blue gels.
There's a lot of like different. I like the way this movie is shot actually because there's a lot of work with different planes in the background. Like there's no there aren't a lot of shots that feel flat. There always feels like there's stuff going on. There's a thickness to the atmosphere in Highlander that I respond to, and I really like the aesthetic. But anyway, Connor kills the Kurgan. Connor is lifted up by a bunch of animated demons.
He says there can be only one, and absorbs a bunch of animation, and he gets the prize.
Yeah. And listen, altogether, the movie has problems, and it's kind of silly, but it's a pretty satisfying 80s action fantasy movie. Yeah.
That it should spin off to so much after this is a little bizarre, because the mythology isn't...
Well, they wrapped it up.
Yeah.
He's the one. That's it. They clearly did not plan for sequels at all.
And in fact, in Highlander 2, he's an old man.
Yeah.
In fact, it takes place in the future.
Still the future, like the 2025 around there?
Yeah. It's like not near future, and he's an old man now.
Yeah.
But he's a miserable old man because the world has turned to garbage.
Yeah.
The ozone layer has gotten so bad that we've had to construct a shield around the entire planet that blocks out sunlight, which Connor himself invented somehow.
Well, he was tapping into the brains of everybody. He tapped into the smart people.
Okay, so he just got all of this knowledge and somehow invented
I'm actually almost willing to accept that. If that was the only problem this movie had, we'd all be lucky. But instead, we get Highlander II, The Quickening.
Highlander II, The Quickening, so we're living underneath this big shield. Nobody talks about how there's vitamin D deficiencies or anything. Nobody just has sunlight anymore. All the plants would be dead.
I assume they're all taking a bunch of pills.
Yeah, but
the vitamin D industry is going to be doing real well right now.
Yeah, but there's no talk about how lack of sunlight would be like killing off the planet.
God, all these rickets. Why do I have all these rickets?
All it's done is essentially turn the world into just like a horrible New York back alley where it's just night all the time. So nobody has any reason to sleep in or do things that they would do during the day, and everybody's turned to crime and misery, and the world's horrible.
All right, so Highlander 2 is going to be difficult to explain, but first let me explain this. There are two versions of Highlander 2, The Quickening. There is the theatrical version, which has some subtle differences. For example, the sky that has been completely covered in a shield is red in the original theatrical cut, but in the director's cut, the renegade cut, if you will, using air quotes, it's blue. Which makes certain lines of dialogue make no sense. Like, wow, have you ever seen a blue sky? Yeah, literally every day. That's what it looks like. So I don't know why they did that. But the biggest difference is in the theatrical cut, there is a huge plot point that no fan of Highlander enjoys, and they completely retconned it out, even in the Renegade cut.
But you know what? I gotta take it. Gotta take it as canon.
Well, they're both canon now. That's the thing. They rewrote. Highlander 2 didn't happen. Even the next movie just pretends. Whoops, sorry about that. That was a myth.
We learn that immortals are an alien species that come from a distant planet or maybe a distant dimension. It's never really made clear.
I think it's a planet. It's called Zeist.
The Zeistians.
There's a huge. It's basically like Dune. Everything is sandy. Everyone wears awesome looking like gear.
They all look like the Fremen.
There's a revolution on Zeist, and they have this big like sort of quorum like at the beginning of Superman the movie, and Ramirez and Connor are Zod and Ursa. And they're being judged by Michael Ironside, who is having the time of his life in this movie. And Michael Ironside just wants to kill them. But according to their laws, we don't kill people. What we do is we send them to planet Earth, where they become immortal and fight each other until one of them becomes all-powerful and decides whether or not to stay or go.
So they're not immortals on their home planet. It's like on Superman's planet. They don't have superpowers until they go to
sun.
Earth.
Yeah. That's basically the gist of it. Unnecessarily complicated. I don't know why they felt the need.
Even in Superman, that's kind of a dumb conceit.
It was made in the 40s. Let it go.
I'm a space alien, but I don't have superpowers on my home planet. I only have them here.
Well, the sun is different.
That
he's
explains
solar powered.
everything.
He's solar powered.
Mm-hmm. So what's wrong with his son that he's not getting superpowers?
It's an older son.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
He needs a young son.
Yeah.
What
I don't know.
How long does he live? Is he immortal?
Yeah, a long fucking
Superman?
time.
Yeah. So if he sticks around on Earth long enough and our son gets old,
I don't think he's going to be that old.
Will he just go to another planet where he has superpowers?
I would. Why not?
He can fly through space.
Problem solved. So, basically, they come to... Michael Ironside is tired of waiting for Connor to die, so he sends a couple of birdmen on hoverboards to kill him.
And they don't... And just like the Fremen, they kind of just fold space. They're just sort of there.
Yeah.
There's no, like, travel sequence. There's no ships. They just sort of appear on Earth.
So these birdmen come to kill Connor. Connor kills them, and the quickening makes him young again.
Yeah.
And then he...
And while he's becoming young... He shouts out, Ramirez! And Ramirez is resurrected.
Yeah, Sean Connery pops up in the middle of a production of Hamlet in Scotland, and Ramirez kind of heckles them by accident and makes a huge ass out of himself. Okay. Then he goes suit shopping and gets a really nice suit.
It's called Highlander. Sean Connery is Scottish. He lands in Scotland, and they're performing Hamlet?
Why not the Scottish play?
That was my thinking.
I realized that, but Hamlet has a scene that everyone who doesn't know Shakespeare knows, which is the Alas Poor Yorick bit.
I think the Scottishness of this series, like the actual Highlander bit of it, is pretty much gone. It's
underserved.
Scotland is gone out of this series.
So there's a big fancy suit shopping montage.
Yes, he gives a suit guy his pearl earring, which evidently is probably very valuable.
Yeah. Meanwhile,
he gets it and he tries on a suit, and he looks nice in that suit.
Meanwhile, Virginia Madsen from Sideways and Candyman is the head of a terrorist organization that's trying to shut down the Shield because they think the Shield has worked already, and the ultraviolet radiation is going to be just fine. Earth has been healed after only about 20 years, and
she doesn't know that for sure.
No,
so
that's just the theory
thinking,
they have.
But yeah.
And she's trying to shut the sucker down, and she runs into Connor because Connor invented the damn thing. Connor is an old man. He shoves her aside. No, I don't. No, I'm old and sad. And then
Christopher Lambert has like the worst old man voice.
He's pretty great.
I just invented the shield. What are you in the third grade play?
Connor blows up while fighting Birdman, becomes young again. Virginia Madsen, who met him 5 minutes ago, sees this old man kill a couple of hoverboard Birdmen, blow up and become young again, shout Ramirez into the sky while lightning hits him, and then she immediately has sex with him in the street.
All right.
That's a thing that happened.
I guess that's what does it for her. It's a very specific series of fetishes.
So Michael Ironside decides, screw it, I'll do it myself, comes to Earth. He pops up on a subway and immediately kills everyone in the subway.
By speeding them to death.
Yeah, the subway ends up going at 1,000 miles an hour, and everyone just sort of flies out the windows screaming. And I'm just like, what is this movie?
He's killing people with G-forces.
Meanwhile, John C. McGinley plays the head of
the evil corporate douchebag.
Yeah, he's the head of the corporation that runs the Shield, and he's trying to make sure the Shield stays up. And Michael Ironside shows up in his office for literally no reason. He has no reason to be there.
Well, he has been spying, so he knows the players.
But
he knows where to go.
He's just trying to kill Connor. He doesn't give a shit about the Shield. It makes no difference to him. So he teams up with John C. McGinley for literally no reason, and they throw like an old scientist in jail, like in top secret. And Connor and
because he knows that the radiation outside the Shield actually is normal.
But they let him die in jail anyway. They could have just killed him. So they throw him in this maximum security future jail, which is literally just a labyrinth.
You know what it is? It's Fortress.
It is Fortress, actually. Now, that is a good futuristic Christopher Lambert movie.
Fortress is excellent.
Fortress is
That's
awesome.
a Stuart Gordon film.
If you haven't seen
fantastic.
Fortress is worth checking down. It's the future, and you're only allowed to have one child. Christopher Lambert.
You're only allowed one shot at having one child.
Yeah, like, so their child died, and they wanted to have another one, and now they're on the run from the law, and they get thrown into this futuristic fortress where everyone's, what do they call it? The intestinator?
Intestinizers.
The intestinizer. They shove this thing in your stomach, and if you
if you step out of line, it activates and you get like really horrible stomach cramps.
And then you don't just get horrible stomach cramps; it expands and expands and expands until your stomach explodes.
Well, if you really misbehave, it'll explode
Kurtwood
inside
Smith,
you.
the other Michael Ironside, is the bad guy
who absorbs amino acids through little ports in his abdomen. It's fantastic.
Fortress kicks ass. Okay. Meanwhile, back in Highlander, Ramirez and Connor break into the labyrinth, and Ramirez decides to let himself die while fighting off a giant metal fan, while Connor and Virginia Madsen drive a few minutes away where the hole in the Shield is, and they say, everything's fine. And then Connor fights Michael Ironside and wins.
Now, taking cues perhaps from Clancy Brown, Michael Ironside is swinging for the walls in this, and I love Michael Ironside in general.
Yeah, we had Michael Ironside on our old podcast, and he was just a nice guy who told cool stories.
He's just a nice Canadian man.
He gave you advice on how to be a better father.
Yeah,
like he took you aside and he told you how to be a good dad, because this is around the time your son was being born.
He was about to be born, and like, here's on how to be a good dad. Well, thank you, guy from Highlander II. But yeah, he's a nice, intelligent man. He saw a UFO. He told us that story. That was
story
great.
About seeing UFOs.
Yeah. He's
so cool.
Seen a couple UFOs.
Yeah, he was a neat dude. So that's the theatrical cut. And there's other weird things. We're not going to get into every single detail.
Well, and he turns off the shield by using his own body because he's immortal, and that wouldn't kill him.
And then Earth is fine.
It's basically, he steps into a giant laser and blocks it.
It's basically the end of Total Recall, which is weird because Michael Ironside was the bad guy in that too. Where basically, like, we're going to throw off this whole dome, and then the whole planet's going to be fine, and everyone's going to be cool. The biggest difference in the Renegade cut, other than it's a bit longer, is they remove every reference to planet Zeist. They're no longer from another planet. Now, they don't make it make sense. They just stopped talking about planet Zeist.
So we still have those scenes of them on a distant planet. It's just not a distant planet anymore.
No, now
it's just another...
No. It's Earth's past.
Yeah.
Which makes less sense.
It's like a distant country now.
Yeah, we're going to send them off to the future where they will be immortal and fight. I'm like, then why are they immortal in the future? That makes even less sense than before. I don't understand. Like, I know everyone hates the whole Zeist thing, but I guarantee the Renegade cut makes less sense to me.
Coming from another planet is actually a lot more grounded than this notion of this ancient race of mortals having a time machine of some kind, or like a magic time travel spell, whatever it is.
I don't get it.
Anyway, speaking of spells...
Oh, yeah, good segue.
Highlander the Final Dimension...
A.k.a. Highlander the Sorcerer?
The Sorcerer.
Yeah, it was released under both titles.
Features a wizard.
Yeah.
In fact, a couple wizards. Yeah. And now it's just revealed that there's stuff like shape-shifting and... Well, not teleportation, but like other kind of magical spells and stuff.
Well, let's hang back. Okay, so the third film completely ignores the second. Just pretends it didn't happen. Takes place in the mid-90s now. And... when you think about the choice Highlander 2 made to say that all of this immortal quickening, the prize, blah, is all sci-fi oriented, took that away. Here it's supernaturally oriented. And we still never know who the hell made this up, because it sounds like a divine plan. Like some game master god has decided this, because it's weird rules. We never find that out, or at least we don't find it out in the movies. But here we open with Connor McLeod like maybe a century after Ramirez died, in Japan, learning sword fighting, but also a little bit of magic.
From?
Mako. Mako is the shit. Mako is one of my favorite actors ever, and he has maybe the coolest voice in movie history. You know Mako as the sorcerer from the Conan the Barbarian movies. He was Uncle Iroh in Avatar: The Last Airbender. He played the show, not the movie.
He played the evil demon Aku in Samurai Jack. Yeah, he's just fantastic.
Did he win an Oscar for Sand Pebbles, or was he just nominated for an Oscar for Sand
I think he was just nominated.
Yeah. Mako was an incredible actor. He was a great presence, and he was a lot of fun, and he ended up in a lot of crap, but he always sold it. So he's just doing this great...
Like Highlander 3, for God's sake.
So all these opening bits with, like, him turning swords into snakes and shit, and making, like, 5 different versions of himself so he can fight an evil Mario Van Peebles with giant nipple piercings. Like, I'm like, okay, I'm actually on board. This is way better than Highlander 2. Like, I'm actually fine for it for a while. And then we cut to the present day. Now, the prologue ends with Mario Van Peebles killing Mako and
absorbing all his magical powers.
Yeah, and now he's a sorcerer, and Connor manages to seal him up under a mountain. Like, gets a whole mountain to collapse on him.
Yeah.
Now, he's not dead because he's immortal. His head hasn't cut off because there's no quickening. So...
Well, it's not. He's not even trapped. Like, he's not pinned under a rock. He's in a cave.
Yeah, just wandering around with a couple of his immortal buddies.
So you got a couple buddies in there. You're all immortals. Either he would start quickening his buddies right away, or they'd wait like 50 years and then start quickening each other. Nothing happens in that cave for 400 years. They're just sort of standing by the rock, waiting for it to open.
Yeah,
like in fighting poise, which I guess you're immortal. You could do that,
but you get bored real fast. I assume Mako had books.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah, it's his plays.
I would like to see a montage of them trying to get out, or some kind of explanation as to how they can't get out.
Yeah, I just the whole deleted scene that's just the montage of them over 400 years being bored. Yeah.
It's like they use their sword, like they chip their swords away, all of their swords down to nothing over the course of a couple decades, and then I guess we can't get out that way.
Yeah, now we're done. It's like Shawshank Redemption, but sad at the end. But here's the weird thing. The movie posits that Highlander 1 still happened. Connor killed the Kurgan and became the One, got married, had all that kind of stuff.
What about this other guy?
Yeah, like, you didn't kill all the immortals. You just forgot about him? Like, how does that fucking work? Meanwhile, Connor has adopted a child in the Middle East for no other reason than so he can get kidnapped at the end. Like, he literally disappears for almost all of the movie. He's got 2 scenes and then he's gone.
And I don't think he's referenced after this film either.
No, he's gone.
He's just out of the series.
No one liked the kid.
Here's the thing about being immortal. You live long enough, nothing really matters anymore.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I got married, I loved her deeply, and she died, and then I just did that 50 more times. It's like, it just becomes a cycle after a while.
We haven't really talked about this. Highlander is probably the most emo action movie franchise.
Broodiest.
Because...
No. The Crow is broodier.
Okay, The Crow was eventually broodier. Initially, Highlander was where it was at because Connor is a sad sack hero. Like, he doesn't he's not motivated to do anything. In fact, he's not actively trying to win the prize. He's just sad because a woman he loved 500 years ago died. That's literally all he's got in the first movie.
It's been 500 years. Maybe it's time to get back in the saddle a little bit.
Maybe a little. Well, that's the plot of the movie. But my point is that he doesn't want anything.
And to be fair, he has a string of lovers throughout this series of movies.
He does. All in the 90s, though.
Starting in 86.
I think every Highlander movie has at least one elongated, prog rock sex sequence.
Really sexy sex sequences.
There's a lot of nudity. Like, this third one has, total nudity. Like, it's I'm not sure why that was an important part of the formula, but there you go.
You know what? Christopher Lambert demanded it. It's like, I gotta get naked. Get me naked in these movies.
This is all I've got
for you.
I want historical records that I looked hot. But yeah, he spends most of these movies just being sad and not wanting to fight. That's an interesting take. It's just sort of like this weird sort of sappy sentimentality to these things. So he's brought back because there's another immortal. Mario Van Peebles breaks out. He's doing supernatural shit. Deborah Kara Unger from The Game is probably where you know her best from.
I know her from Crash, but yeah.
There you go. She's an archaeologist who finds out there's all this cool stuff out there, and she's like, I want in. And
she's also maybe the reincarnated girlfriend of Connor.
Yes. That's true. She's the reincarnated girlfriend
which is
of Connor.
a conceit ripped off directly from The Mummy.
Yeah.
And like various Dracula movies. You've seen it before.
Yeah, and they'll really play with that in the anime film. Basically what happens is the whole movie becomes basically like a remake of the first Highlander, with Mario Van Peebles even having Clancy Brown's gravelly voice for no reason, like kidnapping someone who's close to Connor and taking them on like a car ride with like really violence.
Is weird looking. Like, I don't know what they were thinking when they dressed him this way.
You know what it is? You know, he has Vera Farmiga's hair from Roar.
He does. He's got those like little he kind of has a mohawk though.
I don't know what the hell. But yeah, and the other thing is, Mario Van Peebles doesn't want anything either. He just wants to kill Connor. Connor, like, meanwhile, like, takes a break from the movie, goes to Scotland and has a Rocky IV training montage for no reason, comes back, oh no, he kidnapped my son, and then it's basically the ending of Terminator 2. They're in a big metalworks, there's a huge fight, Mario Van Peebles impersonates someone Connor knows, and the fucking Dr. Feelgood is on the soundtrack. Just like, am I supposed to feel something right now?
You're supposed to feel good. Dr. Feelgood is about a drug dealer, by the way. It has nothing to do with Highlanders.
The fourth film in the series, Highlander Endgame. Now, this is the one that finally, like, connected the movie and the TV franchises.
Now, the TV franchise then came into being after Highlander, The Final Dimension.
And Christopher Lambert appeared in, like, I think it was the pilot of the first episode to just sort of pass the torch, you know, to sort of make the connection. So he was already there. We already knew he was in canon. So they brought him back. And Connor, whose secretary from the first film, finally comes back only to die in, like, the second scene. He's so sad that people around him keep dying that he volunteers for this weird thing where
the Sanctuary.
So in the show, and they never mention it in the movies, there's a group of people called Watchers. Yes, exactly like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And their whole thing is they watch over all of these immortals, make sure everyone's following by the rules, keep the historical records. It's Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But although I think it predates Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Maybe not the movie, though. I don't know. I digress.
Were there Watchers in the movie?
There were no... in the first Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie, yes.
Okay.
So, yeah. Well, there was no other movie. But yeah.
Because the movie came out in 92, I think.
Oh, so yeah, I guess I did take it from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Or at least it's eerily similar.
It's not that creative an idea.
There's a group of Watchers who are trying to make sure that no immortal wins the prize. And in order to do that, they have to make sure that there's always a couple of immortals left over. So they have...
lock them into Iron Maidens and keep them in a basement somewhere.
But the thing is that some of them have actually volunteered for this. They're just being kept in a coma. And the pain of being alive and the tragedy of being alive is too much for Christopher Lambert, so he decides screw it, and he opts for coma. And Adrian Paul, who is Duncan MacLeod, he finds out that Christopher Lambert is out there somewhere and he's going to track him down. Meanwhile, Bruce Payne from Passenger 57 is the bad guy. And it turns out he was also part of the MacLeod clan. Weird. And he lived in the same town, and he was an acolyte of their priest. And when their priest killed Connor's mom because he was a demon, Connor killed the priest, kind of without meaning to. Like, he really wasn't, like, actively trying to murder him. He just was, like, his sort of rage because my mom just got killed kind of thing. Bruce Payne was super sad. Bruce Payne turned out to be an immortal well, and he's been holding a grudge forever. Also, he has a boot with crucifixes on it, which they show about 1 million close-ups of.
I'm guessing that was like a trademark of his from the show.
I don't think he was on the show.
Maybe not, but the way this film is shot, every single like character and every single line seems to have significance that I'm not picking up on.
Yeah, there's all these supporting characters, Watchers, whatever.
Like
I think it's supposed to be important.
Like a supporting character strolls in, and they don't do anything. They just sort of stroll on camera, and they're filmed as if like their appearance is like this big fan. Like there's a moment for the fans to cheer, even though they have no bearing on the plot whatsoever. There's a sex scene where people finally disrobe, and I'm guessing this would be like watching like Mulder and Scully finally, get their kits off.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we finally get to see these actors with their clothes off. So it's probably really titillating for a lot of people. But not for people like us who haven't seen the TV show. It's like completely insignificant for us.
This movie specifically exists to bridge the gap between the series, which not everyone watched, and the movies, which most people watched. Like, or at least they were popular enough to have all these sequels.
The first two, maybe.
So if you're only a fan of the movies, there's this one and then the next live action one just sort of fall really, really flat. And I realized... I remember when Serenity came out, the feature film based on Firefly. I was a big fan of Firefly. I figured it all out. I realized it must have been really weird for someone who's never seen the show to try to follow this shit along.
I've seen Serenity and not Firefly, so I couldn't follow a damn thing.
Yeah, like you think everything is like, oh, see, they reintroduced everything. Yeah, it makes sense to you, but to other people, this doesn't carry weight. Maybe I get the gist of the character, but I don't know why I should give a shit. And that's what happens in Highlander Endgame. The plot of Highlander Endgame, Bruce Payne is collecting a team of immortals, and they're all just going to kill Connor. That's all he wants. He doesn't really want to even necessarily win the prize. And what's really frustrating is on his team is Donnie Yen. Now, Donnie Yen
one of the baddest of all asses.
Yeah, Donnie Yen, I think most American audiences know him now from Rogue One, but Donnie Yen has been a huge star in China for decades, and he's one of the best martial arts superstars on the planet in history. And I remember when I was a kid, I was watching Highlander Endgame. It was like whenever round came out, I was like 18 or whatever.
Yeah, this was late 90s this came out.
Yeah, maybe 2000. I was in high school, early college or whatever like that, and I'm just sort of idly watching it while I'm reading a magazine or something. And I'm like, oh, this isn't really keeping my attention. I'm just going to read my magazine. And then I heard the fighting, and Highlander, even though they're all immortals who can only die through sword fighting, they're kind
not
of
very good sword fighters.
No, they're all medieval sword fighters. There's all clang, 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 and then I hear clang, 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 and I immediately think, is Donnie Yen in this? And then I look up, holy shit, Donnie Yen is in this.
I'd know those sword strokes anywhere.
I did, it was really weird. So Donnie Yen kicks a whole bunch of butt in like 2 fight scenes, which are like some of the best fight scenes in the whole franchise.
The only ones with a little energy to them.
Yeah, because Donnie Yen's a badass, and then he dies really anticlimactically. He just like offers his neck up to Bruce Payne for no reason. I'm like, Bruce, why isn't Donnie Yen the bad guy? That's what you want. No, listen, no one went to see this movie for Bruce Payne. I like Bruce Payne fine as an actor. Nobody went to see this movie for Bruce Payne. There are people who would see this movie if Donnie Yen was the main bad guy.
This was, I think, just a few months before Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, before sort of Chinese sword fight films became really big in the U.S.
I'm not sure about the timeline there.
Maybe not, but I do remember after Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, there was an explosion of like wuxia and kung fu films that sort of started flooding American theaters.
No, Highlander Endgame was 2000, so it was about the same year.
Okay,
it was about the same year. Really could have ridden that coattail.
Crouching Tiger was a Christmas release, however, so
fair enough.
Predated it by at least a couple months.
Yeah. So in any case, they fight Bruce Payne. Oh, Connor convinces Duncan to kill him so that he can take his quickening and become more powerful and defeat Bruce Payne. Okay.
Great.
Doesn't really have a lot of weight to it, but there's a fun little goodbye bit. You want to see, here's the deal, you want to see Connor and Duncan fight.
Together, back to back.
Yeah. No, back to back and each other. Like, that's the thing. Who would win in a fight, Duncan or Connor? I guarantee you that was some geeky, playground argument.
Plenty of conversations began that way.
So we got to have that. I'm like, okay, that's fine. I can totally appreciate that bit of fan service. And he beats Bruce Payne and Bob's your uncle. He met a woman who was going to be an immortal, and he married her hundreds of years ago. But then he had to decide, do I let her just live out her life and die of old age, or do I kill her and make her immortal with me?
And he kills her and makes her immortal.
And she's furious, because who wouldn't be?
Well, here's my problem with the whole notion of the Highlanders. Now, they're all sword-wielding. They all have, reasons to hate each other. And evidently, the ability to hold a grudge for centuries is like a superpower of the Highlanders, because...
They got nothing else. There's no other continuity.
Immortal. I call them Highlanders, the Immortals, and
it's like Doctor Who. I think if you call the Doctor Who, I think we're all, or like you call the Frankenstein monster Frankenstein. We know what you mean. A part of us winces inside, but by this point, we just need to let it go.
So, like I said, if you're immortal, you start to you got to let that stuff go, man. You're immortal, you got to let that stuff go.
I think if they were mortal, they would have, but this person's still around. There's no comeuppance for them, so I can appreciate holding a grudge against another immortal.
So if you're around for 500 years and they're still around, you have no reason to let it go. It's you got to move on. Why? I'm still going to be alive.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so is the person I'm mad at.
I guess that's kind of makes some sense, but I can't stay mad that long.
Sure you can.
I'd cool off after a while.
And then you get mad again.
And then you get mad again. And
You take 100 years off of your vendetta, then you go right back to it.
Well, why don't you take 100 years off of your vendetta and you just have beers for 100 years?
You don't understand, because you're not immortal. And once you're immortal, you'll appreciate the importance of a good grudge. All right, moving on.
I guess so.
The next two came out in the same year, but we'll do the live action one first because it actually closes everything off.
Yeah.
Highlander: The Source, directed by Brett Leonard from Lawnmower Man fame,
and Virtuosity.
And
he also did that Siegfried and Roy IMAX film.
Yeah. And he's doing a lot of work in virtual reality right now.
Surprise.
Surprise. He directed it's basically a made-for-TV movie, Highlander: The Source. It's about Duncan MacLeod, and it turns out it's the future again. The sky is red again. The Earth is going to die again. But this time, the only way to save it, maybe, is to find the source, which is the source of all of the immortal energy. It's basically their holy grail, and they assemble a team of characters who I guess were in the show, and then they try to find the thing, and they unleash a big wrestler overacting Speed Force Cenobite. Who's the bad guy, and he just like they ramp up the speed on the film, and he overacts like crazy, and he's trying to stop him.
Which is a tradition in this series.
I suppose that's true.
So, in addition to the prize and the Quickening and the Sanctuary, now
the Gathering,
now we have the Source. You'd think there would be better names at this point. Like they'd come up with some kind of cool.
Why are they all
nickname.
English names? Why? Because they're people from all over the fucking world, right? Why are they? Why is it one of these names in Russian?
Isn't it like an Aramaic word for the source? So whatever.
It's old. Yeah.
But the source is just this big font, like this big glowing ball of magic. Essentially, this big font of magic.
It's what we could afford to make.
Spewing magic out into the sky 24 hours a day.
Yeah,
and. Like, it's so magic, people just sort of stay away from it, and immortals can go up to it, but the closer they get to it...
The more mortal
they become.
Which is actually not a bad device if you want to, like, sort of escalate the tension. You have a whole bunch of immortals, some of them are actually teaming up together. How do we make this threatening? I'm actually fine with that. That makes a certain amount of sense.
Here's the part that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yes.
There's a tribe of cannibals that have decided to live near the source and eat immortals who have become mortal enough to eat, I suppose. Now, I hope they're finished digesting that meat before they leave the source, because if you eat an immortal and then leave the source, the immortal meat inside your tummy would become immortal, and would it, like, punch its way out?
That's a really good question, and I don't know the answer.
I guess it would be impossible to digest anyway.
I assumed that's how Mario Van Peebles and his two other immortals were living in that mountain. They were just cutting off pieces of themselves and eating that way.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I guess I know they're immortal, but surely they'd want to eat something, right? Surely get hungry. We see them eat.
I guess they don't need food, though, because they'd get, like, emaciated or they'd starve or something.
I guess that's a good point.
Yeah.
Fair enough. This movie is one of those, like...
It's so badly made.
It's so badly made. And I feel bad because I know Brett Leonard's better than this, but...
It looks like it's shot for TV.
It looks like one of those sci-fi original movies that was shot in, like, specifically Romania, where, like, there's a certain kind of woodland that I've only ever seen in Sci-Fi Channel original movies, where it's a forest, but all those trees are really thin and they have no leaves, and you couldn't get lost in it if you tried, but everyone always gets lost in it, and that's the plot of all these movies, and they're always running through them, and someone's always chasing them.
And they never run into trees.
This looks like it was shot in the exact same place as Anaconda 3, which we've seen.
Which was Romania.
Which was Romania. Like, I honestly think I recognize, I don't know, or is Budapest in Romania?
That's Hungary.
It's one of those. It's Eastern Europe.
Oh.
It plays so fake. I think the idea was we're supposed to know these characters or like these characters enough that we'll sort of live with the low production values because, all this cool stuff is happening with these characters we like. They don't introduce these characters or anyone who hasn't seen the show. They're all kind of just one main plot point. He's the young hacker type. He's the albino religious guy. She's human.
That's it.
That's what we got, really. And I guess she's having visions of the Sorcerer or whatever. But, like, everything about this is trying to desperately hide how cheap and uneventful the movie is. And you pointed this out. Every scene includes at least one person saying, "Oh, I forgot to mention."
Like, the entire film is devoted to exposition. And, like, here's how the rules actually work. And I wrote an essay on this a couple of years back and described it as the Columbo of exposition. It's like you think you know everything, it's headed for the door, and then it turns around and says, "Oh, wait, one more thing." If you eat this near the font on a Wednesday, it turns out your feet become immortal. You know, whatever it is. They got these really weird rules that they just have to re-explain and re-explain. And it's kind of the trap that this series has always been kind of pointing towards. It's so nonsensical and so exposition heavy, and the mythology is so, like, it's complicated and unexplainable at the same time that we finally had to reach this point where we just said, screw it, we just don't know anymore.
That's the thing. It sounds simple when you just sort of bring up a conversation. There's a race of immortals. They can only kill each other by cutting their heads off. When there's only one left, he becomes all-powerful. Okay, I can wrap my head around that. The second you start asking questions, it falls way the fuck apart. And the source is like the ultimate example of, and we just asked all the questions, and we came up with all the answers, and it turns out it's boring as fuck and means nothing. The end of the thing, Connor realizes that in order to win, he can't kill that other immortal, which I guess means no one will ever win the prize. And then he gets this to the source, and the whole thing is now his girlfriend is pregnant. That's it. Now Connor gets to have kids. That's what it was all about. It wasn't about the prize. It wasn't about living forever. It was about
Duncan, not Connor.
I'm sorry, you're right. Duncan, an emo hero, finally gets to have kids. The end. Dad, yeah. That's where this all trails off.
Wouldn't it be great if the prize was just like a skateboard? The question I have about this, the one that I constantly want to ask is, surely more immortals are being born all the time.
It's unclear how many there are. It seems like there's a lot by the point they have a show.
In Highlander 2, they kind of established that all of the immortals kind of came into being at the same time, and there's like 1 million of them, and they all just sort of went out into Earth, and now we just have to pick them all off.
Well, they went out at the same time, but they popped up at different times in history, but there's only a finite number.
But at the same time, in the first Highlander, Connor MacLeod was born, right? And he had to be stabbed to activate his Highlander powers.
He had parents.
So if you kill the last immortal and you get the prize, does that mean you really are the last one? Or are you the only last adult? You're the last activated immortal? I mean, what happens if another immortal is activated? Do you become immortal again?
That's what happened in Highlander 2. It feels like Dragon Ball. Like, you just got to find the balls go missing again. You got to find them. The last Highlander movie, and there was another animated movie, but it was only like a recut thing from Highlander the Animated Series, so we're not including that because it was just a couple of episodes of the show.
It's more a TV special.
Yeah, it's called Highlander The Adventure Begins, but we're not covering that. Also because it's really hard to find for some reason.
Well, we'll do it on Cancel Too Soon at some point.
If we ever find that. But the last one is an anime film called Highlander The Search for Vengeance. And this is the second best Highlander movie.
I agree.
Yeah, it goes Highlander 1, which is just cool in of its own element. Highlander Search for Vengeance falls together pretty well, and the animation's really good. Like, it's a cool little movie.
It's an anime film, but it was made with American money and I think filmed with American actors. So it's anime style, but it's not a Japanese film.
Well, it was made by Japanese animation studio. It was made by Madhouse, which is one of the best animation studios.
But it was written and moneyed by Americans.
Yeah, so it's a co-production. The Search of Vengeance is about a new member of the MacLeod clan, Colin MacLeod, who actually was an ancient Roman dissident who would eventually fight alongside the MacLeods and became an honorary member of the family, and they were the only family he ever really knew, so he adopted the name. So that's how... It's kind of a coincidence all this shit happens around the MacLeod clan, but whatever, we're committed to the title Highlander, and we have to fit it in somehow. Otherwise, it makes no sense. So...
Were you, throughout this entire series, how many times did you yell out, Chief...
MacLeod.
Chief MacLeod.
Not very often, but sometimes.
That's a Mystery Science Theater reference for our listeners.
So Colin MacLeod, back in the ancient Roman times, the woman he loved tried to assassinate a Roman general who was going to conquer their village, much like the show Roar. But when she kills the Roman general, it turns out that Roman general is an immortal, and he just gets right back up again, and she solved nothing, and he crucifies the wife, and Colin tries to kill the general. Obviously, it doesn't go well, and he ends up dying, but he dies on Stonehenge, so the general can't finish the job, and then he's reborn, he becomes immortal, and he teams up with the ghost of a druid, which is a thing we have now, by the way, and the druid explains all the rules of Highlander stuff, and then cut to 2,000 years later, he's been trying to kill this one immortal for centuries and keeps failing.
He's just a sucky immortal. He just sucks.
It's now the 23rd century. Society has collapsed. Everything is a bunch of city-states, and this Roman general now rules New York with an iron fist, and there's nothing but ragamuffins and disease left.
Everybody's diseased, and it turns out he's the one who's been releasing the disease just so he can sell the antidote.
There's hardly anyone
it's a
left. What are you using the money for?
Yeah, to get more gold in his tower.
He's got a huge gold tower. He lives in Trump Tower. He's Trump. That's what they're saying. Trump is an immortal evil bastard. It's sort of like, oh, he's immortal. Damn.
I'm so glad we elected a supervillain president.
So that's the deal. Connor teams up with a local prostitute who appears to be the reincarnated version of his beloved. Mm-hmm. She's also the leader.
Second time we've had that in this series.
Yeah, she's also the leader of a resistance movement. They storm the tower. Connor fights the guy, loses, fights the guy again, wins. That's basically it. Except it's really cool looking. Like, all the action is fantastic. That's one of the problems I've always had with the Highlander franchise, and I brought up a little bit with Donnie Yen.
They're not fast and exciting.
Well, all you have to do for centuries is learn how to fight with swords. Anything else is incidental. You gotta learn how to fight with swords. After centuries, they'd be better than that. So here the fights are as cool as they should be.
The first movie, he's at least seen with fighting like two different types of sword fights, because he has a rapier in one scene.
Yeah.
But ordinarily has that gigantic, super long, two-handed battle sword, like Scottish battle sword.
Well, and a katana.
Yeah, but you would think that there would be a great montage where he gets to show off all of the different styles.
Yeah. Now, in the 80s...
Unless your enemy hasn't studied his Agrippa, which I have.
Nice. In the 80s, for a long time, sword fighting in Western movies was more based on a European tradition. Mm-hmm. There was broadswords, and then there was fencing. Mm-hmm. And that was fun, and that was really, really cool. Then we started getting a bit more of a samurai influence with the Star Wars movies. You'll notice that the sword fighting in the original Star Wars trilogy is based off of samurai movies. Quick cuts, it's all a matter of getting someone once. It's not a matter of dancing around and hitting each other's swords a billion times. Then the Chinese influence of sword fighting started infiltrating America, and fighting got a little bit more elaborate, a little bit more theatrical, a little bit more presentational.
A little bit.
Well, and then became significantly so.
And then Darth Maul happened, and everything just collapsed.
Kind of, yeah. And listen, that's fine. There's a place for it. But it's all different kinds of styles. So I was kind of more in the mood for more of an Asian style of fighting in these Highlander stuff, because that's a really great style of fighting, and I wish we'd seen more of it. And instead, we just keep getting these cleaver attacks. And
so now we finally have the well. Not only do we have the really
guy with
fast,
a giant chainsaw.
Yeah, I was about to say we
and
not only have the fighting, but we have this new variety of future weapons. So we have this like gigantic oaf with a double chainsaw weapon,
which is cool.
It's like, Of course, an immortal would have a chainsaw.
That's awesome. Of course, you would.
Gotta take off somebody's head.
There's another scene where one of the immortal, finally female immortal, another one after the fourth one, gets shot in the head, but then she's fine, and then she gets a grenade in her mouth that explodes her head, and that one works.
Yeah.
So that's where the line gets cut off. Brain damage, you'll be fine. No more brain, dead.
Destroy the brain, you destroy the ghoul.
There you go.
There is a scene in this movie, and it answered a question I actually kind of had, and I'm kind of embarrassed that I had this question. But, you have to cut off their head. Good. You have to cut them across the neck.
Yeah.
Well, and I was thinking, well, what if your aim is bad and you cut them, like, halfway across the face? Like, what if you cut off their
top part of their head?
Their eyes.
Yeah.
Like, will the top of their head grow back? Will that do it?
And it turns out, yes.
What if you slice their brain, like...
lengthwise,
vertically.
Yeah, down the top,
down the front.
Yeah.
It's like, will that do it? Evidently, no, because that happens in this movie. Somebody gets their face sliced.
So it's got to be a clean cut. That's the problem.
Clean cut across the neck.
Yeah. It's a weird parameter.
The other question I had is, what if you held down an immortal and decided to take their head off with a handsaw? Like,
what about it?
Do you have to get through their spine, or do you have to does the head have to separate entirely from the body?
I'm pretty sure
if there's if there's a single strip of flesh still connecting the head to the neck.
I'm pretty sure it's
are
at
they
least
still alive?
the spine.
At least the spine.
It's got to be at least. I think it's got to be. You got to sever it, and then it has to detach enough that you couldn't just knit right back together.
Okay.
I think that's what it has to be.
So you could sever it and still sort of rest it on a neck, and it would knit back.
It worked for the Kurgan. The Kurgan almost had his head cut off, and that was fine. So that's my philosophy on that.
These are strange questions I'm asking.
And Highlander made us ask them. After seeing all of the Highlander movies, and bear in mind, I watched them. I've seen most of them before. After watching them all over the course of 48 hours, by the way.
Oh golly,
it's a long week. What are your thoughts on the franchise overall? Just in general.
It's shabby, to be sure. It makes sense the same way Gremlins makes sense, in
that it doesn't?
In sort of this fairy tale way, I suppose.
Yeah. Don't ask questions, just go with it. Kind of way?
Just sort of roll with it. And if you do get this kind of mythic-ish, if not kind of sloppy and overstuffed movie that doesn't really need any sequels. I mean, plus there's no queen in any of the sequels, so they all fail in that regard.
They do like a cover, like a really shitty cover in the source.
I don't want to talk about
it. It doesn't work. The thing,
from like Seven Mary 3 or whatever.
If Highlander were made today, I think here's the thing: Highlander is a franchise that I think actually warrants a reboot because people like it. It's got like people know about it. People are interested in it, but once you actually start exploring it, you realize that there's only like 2 good ones. And again, the series fine, but like the whole as a franchise as a whole doesn't really work. If you were starting a Highlander from scratch, knowing that you shouldn't wrap literally everything up at the end of the first movie, you would have a franchise. There can be only one. Fine. Don't let there be only one at the end of the first movie. Just have them solve some other problem, and then you have more Immortals for later.
No, the idea is, there can be only one. I've killed the last one, but I don't have the prize. Oh, well, it turns out there's a whole continent you forgot to take care of.
There you go. That would actually be a fun little ending. Like, you need to, like, sort of... I'm not a huge fan of, like, you have to plan for the whole franchise at once, but... If you think it might be a franchise, you might want to leave yourself open to eventually have one, as opposed to negating it completely, which is what Highlander did. They had no idea this would be as popular as it was. They decided to be a weird one-off, and it's a weird one-off. It's
a fine weird one-off. It's not like a solid classic or nothing, but
it's a cool film.
It's definitely enjoyable.
Yeah, and that's Highlander.
That's Highlander for you.
And it appears that the winner of the next month's poll, so if you want to follow along with us, we're going to have to watch all the Lethal Weapon movies.
That's right.
Which it isn't that bad. Actually, it's not that many of them. So that'll be fun. It'll be an interesting thing to talk about.
I've seen the first one once and the fourth one 3 times, and none of the others. So
that'll be an interesting watch for you.
Yeah,
there you go. So that'll be at the end of January. But before we can get to the rest of January, we have to finish off 2017, and we have to talk about our list of the worst films of 2017. Now, like our previous episode, we did the best films of 2017. We're going to focus on our top 10. We're going to do a bunch of runners-up.
Yep.
And, this is going to suck. Okay, so, because I went through a lot of pain this year.
And you saw, like, even worse films than I did. Like, you really reached.
It's interesting. When you see, the good films are films we all want to share together and we all see together. And for the most part, there was a lot of overlap on our best of list. And... bad films are ones that...
They're deeply personal is what they are.
You chance upon different bad films over the course of a year. There are different bad films you seek out. So...
There were, I have to admit, there were 2 films I watched because I had heard they were so bad that they might make a worst of list.
Did they make your worst of list?
One of them did.
Okay.
One of them is my number 1.
Wow.
But we listed them 10 to 1, gradually becoming worse as they become. So our number 10 is the 10th worst film of the year.
Yeah, and again, much like our best of list, it's not like don't worry so much about what was number 9 and what was number 10. We're saying they all suck.
Although my number 10, I will qualify.
Okay, why don't we start with your number 10?
My number 10 is Friend Request.
Okay,
because Friend Request is like dumber than a bag of hammers, but I kind of had fun watching it.
What is Friend Request? It flew under a lot of radars.
Friend Request is a horror movie about a popular girl who, out of the goodness of her heart, decides to befriend the creepy goth poet girl in her college class.
Who, shockingly, has no friends on Facebook.
And yeah, the only currency that matters at all in this universe is how many friends you have on Facebook. Now, it's never called Facebook, it's social media.
But it's designed to look exactly like Facebook. It
looks like Facebook.
Yeah.
She becomes her only friend on Facebook. She's a little bit creepy. She does creepy goth art. And
she's weirdly attached.
The further down her feed you go, the more horrific and kind of witchy they become.
Oh my God, what a shocking gif.
I know, it's like, it's just a gif. It's just a gif. No, it's shocking. She eventually unfriends this creepy girl. The creepy girl takes it so personally that she kills herself, but not before cursing her social media account.
Yeah, she kills herself in front of her computer, which downloads her soul into the internet, and then her soul...
They look at the code and it's got, like, runes in it. It's, like, so stupid.
Yeah, it's like someone who heard of technology once read the screenplay. And she's downloaded herself into the internet, and her whole thing is she's going to make this popular girl lose all her friends on Facebook. That's the horror.
Yeah. Now, if it were a little... Oh, God. If it were a little less like witchy and supernatural, like if she just started becoming less popular and you weren't really sure if there was a magic element, then this might be an actual kind of interesting social commentary.
Yeah.
No intelligence
She
whatsoever.
just posts bad things on her Facebook and people unfriend her.
And there's all this like really horrible like I can't delete this comment. I can't delete my account. What's going on? And like that's the source of so much drama.
There are scenes of our heroine like walking around being all sad. Well, there's like a ticking clock superimposed.
A Chiron appears on the screen,
just showing her losing friends.
Yeah, like that's her life force is draining. Her friend count is going down.
Friend request is
actual line of dialogue. I can't unfriend her, and somebody says, "Unfriend that dead bitch."
Unironic.
Unironic. I want to see a t-shirt that says "Unfriend that dead bitch."
I'm glad you put friend request on your bottom 10 list because I put it on my runners up. Okay. I had too much fun watching this unbelievably terrible movie. Like, it's bad.
It is bad.
But I had so much fun watching it, I couldn't put it in my bottom 10 because it didn't hurt me. Like, I actually enjoyed watching this terrible. It's a really entertainingly bad movie. But
it's not even good bad. It's just bad but entertaining because of it.
This is a good ironic.
But it's bad.
This is a great ironic watch, and every decision in it is just stupid. So like it's really badly made, but I like theoretically this should be number one, but like it's too entertaining. Okay. Yeah, I feel like bad isn't necessarily incompetent, and bad is painful for me. So all my top 10 or bottom 10 are painful.
A movie that makes this many bad decisions deserves recognition.
I can appreciate that. My number 10 is a romantic comedy called Home Again.
Oh, the Reese Witherspoon film.
Yeah.
I did not see Home Again.
Home Again. Okay, so people who listened to our program, heard it last week, heard us talk about Bicycle Thieves. Bicycle Thieves was part of the Italian neo-realist movement, which came in a response to what is called the White Telephone movies. The White Telephone movies are stories of implausibly bourgeois people with implausibly bourgeois problems whose lives and issues and plots have absolutely no relation to any human being who isn't fabulously wealthy and out of touch. Home Again is a White Telephone movie.
Yeah.
Home Again is so spectacularly alienating, the only justifiable response is to run out of the theater and make a neo-realist film right then. Reese Witherspoon plays... So glad you like that. Reese Witherspoon plays a wealthy heiress whose father was a great artist who made brilliant motion pictures in the Godard and Truffaut vein. She has no problems. She has wonderful cherubic kids. She is in the process of getting a divorce from Michael Sheen, but even that's pretty amiable. And she has 3 mega hunks move into her guest house and solve her non-existent problems and all fall in love with her. And she fucks at least one of them. And at one point, here's where the fantasy is. One of these guys says, "Hey, you have anything from IKEA I can assemble?" Like, that's the fantasy.
Oh my god.
Romantic comedies often espouse...
I like the luxury in something like Call Me By Your Name. Because that is like just unabashedly luxurious. In a lot of American romantic comedies, they present it as if that's sort of the norm.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
Now, there's nothing wrong with a fantasy of affluence, of power,
comfort.
Any sort of Pygmalion kind of thing, where you start with nothing and then you get something and it's great. I appreciate that fantasy. Everyone's had that fantasy. The problem with Home Again is that it espouses the idea that having everything is the problem. And it's not, because it's not like she's emotionally hollow or vapid or that she's Scrooge and she has a lesson to learn. She has everything. She gets more. The end. It's incredibly alienating. There's nothing to it. And it's just a shallow, vapid, surfacey movie that just feels completely out of touch with any experience. I remember when This Is 40 came out, and everyone talked about how, these people they're poor, so they sell their John Lennon drawing, and then they make their rent that way. Isn't that a tragedy? How bourgeois. Yes. That is way more relatable than Home Again, because at least those felt like real characters. These are like skeletons of characters just walking around and fucking each other. It's terrible.
I'd watch a movie if it was just like animated skeletons fucking.
Well, yeah. I'm sure you can find that. Don't Google that.
It'll be called Boned.
No one. Ooh.
Sorry.
Seriously though, don't Google that. What's your number 9?
My number 9 is another horror movie. It was a sequel. This was a good year for non-notable bad sequels and remakes.
This is a good year for bad sequels.
Yeah, and what more useless sequel was there than Rings?
Another one that made my runners up, but it's really bad.
Yeah. Now Rings has a germ of something interesting at the beginning.
That's why it's a runner up.
Because it tries to tackle the completely weird mythology of the Ring series logically, and of course the absurdity that espouses.
So if you don't remember The Ring was a story about
it was a haunted video cassette.
You watch the video cassette, 7 days later you die, unless, and this was like the big twist at the end of The Ring, so if you haven't seen it, skip ahead a minute or two. Unless you make a copy of it and show it to someone else and sort of spread it around like a chain letter. The opening of Rings is a college professor has found the tape. He knows about this urban legend, and he is showing it to his students and studying the effects, and then after like 6.5 days, he has them copy it and show it to someone else, and he studies that person.
Yeah.
Which is not an unclever idea.
And because we're no longer in the era of video cassettes, just copying a file is enough.
Yeah, you can just do it on a computer.
Copy, yeah.
There actually has to be a scene where someone explains what a VHS is. Like, that's how far we've gone in 20 years. God.
But that he has this sort of Ring lab where they're just making copies of the video and looking at the video just unabashedly, and there's no specialness or scariness to it at all anymore. It's just mechanics.
It's kind of like...
that part I appreciated.
Because that part feels like kind of the worst case scenario of geekdom. And we just talked about with Highlander, where the more you ask questions, the less fun it becomes. And that's kind of what happens. So,
you think about it, that's what's happened to something like Star Wars. People are just in a lab looking at it on screens all the time, and there's just no emotional effect anymore.
So the plot of Rings is there's a girl her boyfriend is involved in this. She watches the video to save his life, but her video is slightly different. So she has to go find the source of this video.
Evidently there's code in the code, and
probably runes in that code.
But the old video was just like this surrealist nightmare thing. It was actually really scary.
It was well made, yeah.
This new one is just like hints as to where it came from.
Yeah.
And we learn more secrets about...
It's the same fucking movie as the first one.
Mom and Vincent D'Onofrio shows up as this crazy dude because he's Vincent D'Onofrio.
Look, it's the same fucking movie as the first one. We watch the video. How are we going to not die?
But
we have to find the
less interesting and not at all clever.
Exactly, because like the first one is about like discovering this horrible thing that happened to this young girl, and it all reflects upon the single mother who's actually not a very good mother, and it actually relates in some way to the protagonist. This is just young college girl goes to small town with spooky secret. Walks around some, beautifully ugly buildings, discovers something bad happened, and then there's a small twist. And the twist is actually fucking lame. It's like nowhere near as cool as like the oh shit ending of the original The Ring, or even the remake of the original The Ring. Or the remake of the remake, but I digress. There's a lot of rings. This is just... Again, the opening is just interesting enough that it took it out of my top 10.
All right.
But yeah, this is just a bad, boring fucking movie.
It's such a drag. It was so painful to watch.
All right, my number 9 is a movie that a lot of people really liked. In fact, my number 9 and my number 7 are movies that are ending up on some best of lists, but I'm going to stand by it. Number 9 is a remake that adds nothing to the original that doesn't hurt this film. It is a film called Beauty and the Beast.
You know what? This is my number 3.
Nice. Beauty and the Beast is one of the most successful motion pictures of the year, and I get it. It's a remake. It's a quote-unquote live-action remake, even though a lot of it is animated, of one of the best Disney animated movies. It's a really, really great movie. And they made it longer, and in making it longer, they expanded it in ways that make everything fall apart.
Well, they highlighted the problems with the original. Now, the original is 75 minutes?
Yeah, it's pretty lean.
It's trim, and you don't need that much for the Beauty and the Beast story.
Yeah. And here, they add a shit ton of padding, and when they add all this stuff, it really sacrifices everything. Like, for example...
I don't mind the song. They added a song.
It's the worst song in the movie, but that's not the problem.
My problem is you're going to remake this. You're going to do the same songs.
Well, my problem is there's a bunch of problems I have with this, and we'll talk about my plot problems in a minute. My biggest problem is this: of all the quote-unquote live-action Disney remakes, everything
There's
from
been about a half dozen by
yeah,
now.
but like they're good ones, like The Jungle Book. They're bad ones, like Alice in Wonderland. It's good. Like it's
all right.
They're bad
I like
ones.
Cinderella.
Like, Cinderella is actually really great. Maleficent is not good, but it has an idea. This is the only one that doesn't have a new take.
Not at all.
There's nothing it has to contribute to the original. It has no new perspective. It has no new angle. It has no unique reason to exist other than we're doing it again.
In fact, there's not even a new aesthetic. They try to take every single visual cue they can, right down to like the colors of people's outfits and hairdos and stuff.
It's a completely redundant experience. And on that level alone, I think it deserves at least an honorable mention on any worst of the year list, just because it is a completely cynical enterprise. This is the most corporate movie of the year, except for the film that made my number one. Well, okay, actually, no. There's two, but I digress. They're all on my list.
I mean,
but like,
it's also difficult to see any Disney property these days without thinking of the giant corporation, just because we know what's happening with Disney right now.
Yeah, they're turning into this Cthulhu octopus of money
this
and
disgusting tar that's just seeping into everything. So watching Beauty and the Beast in that environment just highlights how cynical it is.
But regardless, and on top of it, I'm sorry, I think it's an ugly motion picture. They sapped all the color out. The animation the frame rate is all super off, so all the animated characters just feel fake. But then they added all of these weird elements that don't contribute anything and actually make it just really, really fucking worse. Everything from simple plot things like, oh, by the way, the Beast has a teleporter now. Oh, okay. Well,
so why'd you send her away on a horseback through a dangerous forest?
Like, at the end of the movie, she has to get somewhere, and time is of the essence. But you send her on a horse so you can have a song, rather than send her in a teleporter, which she knows you have. What the fuck? But then there are also things like, you ever notice how the Beast, the prince, is the one who is cursed, but all of his servants are cursed. Now, in the original movie, they don't really talk about that. The vague implication is the people who work for the person who is corrupt or evil bear some of the blame, because they're part of a system, and what the king represents the land. Okay,
they're members of the kingdom.
In this movie, they make it very explicit that they're cursed because when the king was abusing his son and making him evil, they said nothing. Couple of things with that.
First of all, making him evil.
Okay, yeah, making him evil. First off, that means that the person who put the curse on him in the first place considers him the victim, and yet she's cursing him anyway. She blames everyone around him, but she's blaming the victim more than anyone else. Also, I'm going to throw it right out there: if there's a king out there and he's doing something you don't approve of, and you're a scullery maid, you're not going to say, hey.
You don't stop. You don't say,
he's evil
stop,
enough.
king.
He's already evil. He's just going to decapitate you. What are you supposed to fucking do? It all falls apart. It all falls, everything about it, just completely, and I could go on a long litany of this.
The element that really bothers me is how often Belle, throughout the years since the 1991 film, has turned into kind of an inspirational heroine. She wants adventure. She wants a lot. She actually just marries and settles down after all that, but that's beside the point.
Yeah, she goes to the next town over and
marries a rich guy. Yeah, that's her big adventure.
Gaston has this thing, and you're supposed to realize how evil Gaston is, because Gaston is saying, oh, well, you should marry... I'm the best person you could possibly marry in town. I'm wealthy and handsome, and you should settle down, and that's what you want. She says, no, I want more. I want adventure. I want blah, 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 blah. So what does she do? She goes to the next town, marries someone, and then never moves.
Yeah,
It's a thing that you can gloss over in the original because it's short and sweet.
And it's romantic.
And it's romantic and it's functional. Story, The longer you linger there, the more these obvious problems show up.
And they make Gaston too sympathetic. And
I don't know about that.
They introduce this element where we finally learn what happens to Belle's mother, which is an element that we didn't need addressed.
It doesn't matter.
They are originally Parisian. They're big city folks. And it's implied that is why she longs for a better life out of the country.
Because she was born to affluence.
Yeah, because the affluence urban life is now her birthright.
Screw you.
So if you're a small person, if you're a small town person, and you're interested in books and you want to get out of this small town, you know what? Just stay there, because unless you are actually born into the big city, you don't deserve to move to the big city.
Beauty and the Beast sucks.
It's so bad.
It's a bad movie. We left a really sour taste in my mouth. What's your number 8, I guess?
My number 8 is Gore Verbinski's A Cure for Wellness.
I didn't see this. I've heard mixed things. Some people say the aesthetic is so gorgeous it's worth it.
The aesthetic is really well, here's the problem. It's 2.5 hours long. It's a long, long, long movie. And like maybe the last 45 minutes are a pretty decent Hammer film, and it gets really lurid and really bloody. And there's a lot of really cool like nightmare imagery. Like there's a scene where Dane DeHaan, the story is Dane DeHaan plays this fellow who has to go get a missing CEO who is checked into this remote spa in Europe.
And one of these luxury spas where everything is affluent and gorgeous.
And they need to bring this guy back so they can blame this crazy guy in a spa for all of the malfeasance that's been going on at the company.
Good times.
Yeah, and Dane DeHaan has to do it because they actually have blackmail material on him. Okay, so too much backstory already. He goes up to the spa. He can't see him. The spa is like this weird nightmare place where everybody behaves really strangely. And there's like really great scenes where he's like he's wandering around in a sauna that has like multiple chambers, and he's on a walker. So he's
if you've
moving
seen
really
the trailer,
slowly.
it looks like a BioShock movie. It looks really cool.
And like he's wandering around and he can't see, and he sees like way down, and then an elk passes by, like through one of the spas. Like what is going on? Why is there an elk in the sauna? Kind of nightmarish, kind of cool, and there's weird hallucination sequences. The problem is, it's one of those things where you're not really sure what's hallucination and what isn't, and by the time you realize that there are no rules, you don't care anymore because nothing's at stake, and it loses sight of the story, and it just goes on and on and on. It's so boring. And it's so pointless. It's like Gore Verbinski knows how to make a really stylish scene, but there's no end to any of it, and it's like 1,000 loose ends that never connect in any sort of interesting ways.
So it's just kind of nothing.
So there's a lot of cool visual stuff, but when you if that's all you have, it only highlights how little else you have.
Well, fair enough. My number 8. You just watched this movie, so I'm very curious to see if it ends up on your list, and if so, where. My number 8 is a film called The Book of Henry.
This is my number 1.
Oh, awesome!
I hated this movie so damn.
There's so much to hate!
Because it doesn't make any damn sense.
Okay, The Book of Henry is a film from Colin Trevorrow, who directed Jurassic World, and he was gonna direct Star Wars Episode 9, but that didn't work out.
Because of The Book of Henry, I think.
That's what some people think, and I would be very surprised if it had nothing to do with it. I think if The Book of Henry had been a huge hit and won a bunch of Oscars, maybe Disney would have been more inclined to give him a chance, but there's a whole bunch of behind-the-scenes stuff, and I don't know all the details. The Book of Henry is one of the worst conceived movies I've ever seen in my life.
Well, it's morally depraved, but it doesn't know it.
Has no idea. It plays this most disgusting plot you've ever seen as if it's charming, as if it's a delight, as if it's fucking Simon Birch, and you're just like, what the fuck?
Nice Simon Birch drop there.
Now, in order to explain why the Book of Henry is terrible, we're going to have to explain some plot stuff that happens in the middle of the movie. In the movie,
but you know what? These are kind of selling points and also warnings.
Yeah, like
so we're going to give away the ending.
No, I don't think we're going to give away the ending. We're going to give away the middle.
Right.
We're going to give away the middle, and we're going to tell you like where the plot really goes, because it starts off like this. There's this kid, he's super fucking precocious. He's so precocious that his mother, played by Naomi Watts, no longer has to do anything. He's cooking her books. He's buying stocks for her.
Yeah, she's wealthy. I think she doesn't even realize how wealthy she is. She still works as a waitress.
Yeah.
And talks about how poor she is. So I guess she doesn't know she has money, even though they live in this gigantic, like, really well production designed home.
Yeah.
Which I think is supposed to look messy, but looks like a set.
Yeah, everything looks super fucking fake. He has a younger brother who's basically a normal kid, and he's perfect. And he discovers that the girl next door who he has a crush on, whose father is like the commissioner or chief of police.
He's the police chief.
He's the police chief. He's abusing his daughter. And he's horrified. And he starts making copious notes.
He starts taking notes, and he visits a gun shop.
Yeah, it gets really kind of dark and weird. And then just when you think this might actually go somewhere, we find out he has terminal brain cancer.
Yep. And there's a lot of long scenes and weepy scenes about how he's slowly dying.
Yeah.
And he dies.
Yes. And it's all fucking sad. This is the halfway point of the movie. Everyone's fucking sad. And then the little brother finds the notebook the kid said. This is the last plot point I'll reveal. Kid finds the notebook that Henry had written. And he reads it and he says, "Mom, Henry wants us to kill our neighbor."
And Mom says, "Okay."
Yeah, Henry left plans to murder the neighbor, and there's a whole chapter called Why You Can't Just Tell the Authorities. And it's all about them trying to, like, honor their child's memory by committing a horrific murder for him.
And there is
because it's suddenly justified.
There's a line of dialogue where she says, this is pretty horrible, but there's no moral weight to any of this. It's actually supposed to be seen as something kind of heroic and cathartic, murdering this man and rescuing this girl.
There's a version of this story that acknowledges the darkness of it and runs with it anyway. And there's this Coen Brothers weird
That's a film directed by Lynn Ramsey, and it stars Tilda Swinton, and that's a great film. That version of this.
Okay, you could have done that. There's a version of this that kind of works. Colin Trevorrow plays this shit like it's an Air Bud sequel. Like everything is light and perfect, and he has no idea.
It's supposed to be this kind of, like, maybe a little bit dark, but still really kind of warm story about saving a girl from this horrible man.
It's absolutely repugnant at just how they refuse to analyze. They get to one point towards the end where they kind of start suddenly acknowledge it. But basically, Naomi Watts is playing the worst mom in the fucking world, and the movie has no fucking idea. We find out this little kid who's supposed to be this cherubic Jesus Christ figure, and we find out ultimately he argues that murder is justified if I fucking say so, and I couldn't think of the right phone number to call to report someone who's being cruel to their child.
He's not depicted, like, he's a little bit, like, aloof, he's on the spectrum, but he's not depicted as, like, a psychopath, like somebody who actually had, like, if you saw him, like, murdering a cat early in the movie, it might make a little more sense.
All of a sudden, it makes sense! That would be the twist. That's like the closing credits bit.
All you need is one murdered cat. And the movie would be saved.
Mom, Henry wants us to kill a cat.
Wait a minute. It's Chekhov's murdered cat. You introduce it in Act 1.
The Book of Henry sucks.
It's so bad.
What's your number 7?
My number 7 is Snatched.
Okay. I ultimately didn't hate this one, so tell me why you hate Snatched so much.
Because it's racist and misogynistic and horrible.
Well, okay, fair enough. Can't really argue that.
Amy Schumer has to go on a trip with her estranged mom, who is a doting, cleanliness, safety-obsessed mom who never takes any chances.
Never leaves the house.
Mom, you gotta go take chances. Let's go on this dangerous trip. And they go on a dangerous trip and they get kidnapped by all the non-white people. All the non-white people are villains in this movie. It's incredibly racist. And it doesn't think very highly of its female protagonists either, who are horrible shrews, who are liars and don't do anything positive with their time on this planet.
Okay, that's very okay.
And it's really kind of a pity because Goldie Hawn is funny and talented. Amy Schumer is funny and talented.
That's my thing.
I wish they could be funny and talented in this movie.
Okay, that's my thing.
Goldie Hawn hasn't made a movie for a long time.
I know.
And she came back for this. It's worse than the Banger Sisters.
Whoa! Let's not say things we can't take back.
I will stand by it.
Here's what I'll say about Snatched. I think Amy Schumer and Goldie Hawn are funny enough together that they get me through just how poorly conceived a lot of this movie is. And I laughed enough. I laughed enough that I was willing to overlook obvious fucking flaws, and so it doesn't sink all the way down to my bottom lip or anything.
I don't think they're funny together is the problem.
Well, there you go.
It's one of those screenplays where they just sort of let the two stars riff a little bit, and you can tell they had no material, so they fell back on that really lazy improv trap of just bickering about useless stuff in extreme situations. That's rarely funny. You gotta be better. You need to do, I guess, a little more riffing or have a little bit more structure with that to get some humor out of it. Don't just put Amy Schumer and Goldie Hawn in a cell and expect them to just be funny.
Okay, I thought the tapeworm scene was funny.
It was a little gross.
Because I haven't seen that one.
Yeah,
I haven't seen that bit. There's a couple of bits here I hadn't seen in a comedy before. It's just I think
it feels like they were making it up as they went along.
I think so, but like I don't know, like this one, I don't know. Maybe I was just in a good mood the day I saw this, and I was just willing to cut people some slack. There you go. My number 7 is one that I'm amazed that any of these movies aren't my number 1.
Just because they're all so terrible.
These are all kind of interchange. They're all like a tie for number 1 as far as I'm concerned. So this is another one that a lot of other critics loved.
Oh dear.
loved it.
I think this might be on my list.
And when I said I thought it sucked, I get like people I respect treat me like, why? What movie did you watch? I hate that argument. What movie did you watch? We watched the same movie and we took away different things because we're different people. We need to nix that response. The response is useless. Oakjaw sucks.
Oakjaw's my number 5.
Okay, it's Oakjaw is the latest one from Bong Joon-ho, who did Snowpiercer, and The Host, and has made a lot of good movies. And this is a very ambitious movie, and I think there's a lot of things it does right for a while. It's a story about super pigs. Not superpowered pigs, just giant pigs that are being produced by a huge corporation led by Tilda Swinton.
Although that's supposed to be a twist, that they're like, they introduce them as if they just sort of found them in nature.
It's the most obvious twist in the world.
Yeah, but
it's not a twist.
Clearly these things have been genetically engineered by a big corporation.
Yeah. So they send these pigs out into the wild to be raised by various people, and the winner will eventually be taken back for... It's a weird, stupid premise to begin with.
So the corporation will send the pigs out for a decade.
Yeah.
And when... At the end of the decade, they will choose... For some reason, there's like going to be this big unveiling of the super pig.
Yeah.
In a big public parade.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a food crisis. Just start farming them immediately. Just start killing them off and eating them. It's okay.
And then we cut to this young girl who has been raising her super pig, Okja, who is the size of a Totoro. In fact, they even do a shot from Totoro with her laying on the pig's stomach. Like, they know it's a Totoro. And... the implication, once Jake Gyllenhaal overacting like mad...
which is the only thing I liked about the movie, actually, was
I
Jake
like Tilda
Gyllenhaal's
Swinton.
overacting.
I like Tilda Swinton's overacting, too. But he shows up and he looks at Okja and it's like, wow! And the implication is that Okja is like the big one.
Yeah.
Okja's like, oh my god, she made this pig huge. What was it? It must have been love or something like that. And that I think
it must have been love.
You think that's where it's going. Turns out all of them are that size. There's literally nothing special about Okja.
It's special because it is of uniform color. The other ones like had spots and stuff, and I guess they thought that wouldn't photograph well.
In any case, they take Oakjaw from the little girl. The little girl runs away to get it back, and there's this really great chase scene where she's trying to get to the pig, and also there's a bunch of eco-terrorists who are trying to rescue the pig from the corporation. All of this is really good.
No.
This scene is cool.
The eco-terrorists need to be nixed from this film entirely.
By this point in the movie, all we know about them is that they're trying to rescue the pig.
Right.
There's a cool chase sequence, and then it falls apart immediately for a million different reasons. Firstly...
and we're going to tell you those reasons.
We're going to tell you those reasons right now. Once the corporation gets the pig...
it doesn't kill the pig right away.
No. They decide to sexually assault the pig and make you, the viewers at home, watch this, even though that's not a thing that happens.
In the food industry? No.
That's
not how they breed animals.
They went to this bizarre, stupid, completely unnecessary... violent extreme halfway through a movie for shock value that doesn't.
And they keep cutting back to the pig's face, and it's like it has this like pain expression, and it's crying.
And it's like, we didn't need this. Who are you convincing that didn't already know?
Alfonso, don't do it.
It makes no sense. It's brutal. It's painful. It is the worst kind of tawdry, sleazy, pointless plot device. And then on top of that, the story just goes on.
Well, it goes. The whole point of the eco-terrorists is they're trying to like free the pigs. That the meat industry is doing something really, really horrible to the pigs. As if we don't already know what the meat industry is doing to animals right now. We don't need this oblique science fiction metaphor about an imaginary animal to reveal things that are happening in the meat industry that are actually not nearly as bad as what's actually going on in the meat industry today.
And yet they still feel the need to make shit up.
Yeah.
It's seriously, it's
like, oh no, we're leading these pigs to slaughter. And like, I think he was even taking visual cues from like Holocaust movies.
I think it was.
It's the most unbelievably tasteless thing.
It's such a lazy, shitty, cheap shot of a movie, and here's the thing: it's making arguments I basically agree with. Like, we need a huge reform of the meat industry. There's a lot going wrong. Yes, this is a bad way to do it. This is a bad, tawdry, bad way to do it.
We had a film version of Fast Food Nation. Richard Linklater directed it, and that film ends with documentary footage of a cow being slaughtered.
Yeah.
And you actually get to see the actual horrors of it, and that is going to stick with you.
That's all you need.
Way better, like an actual cow being slaughtered.
And they feel the need to sort of sneak it into the middle of an E.T. knockoff. It's like, oh, we'll shock kids into it. I'm like, dude, don't. Just fucking don't.
Yeah.
Just fucking don't. Okay, moving on. What's your number 6?
My number 6 is Downsizing. Another
a
film that
it's nowhere near my bottom 10.
It starts with a kind of promising premise, this kind of little quirky science fiction idea where the planet is running out of resources, and we've discovered a way to shrink humans down to like maybe 2 inches tall. And at a reduced size, all of a sudden your dollar goes further, and you're consuming fewer resources. Birds are a problem, but you move underneath a
huge net.
A huge net, and you're okay. And sort of playing that out raises a lot of interesting sci-fi questions. Okay, what if we do shrink ourselves? What's the long-term effects of that? You know, how does gravity affect you? How do we consume resources? Maybe different resources will start to be depleted faster. Maybe once everybody's shrunk down, the dollar thing doesn't matter anymore, and everything just goes back to normal.
Everything's going to equalize real fast, yeah.
Instead, we have to couch it in this really dumb white guy learns an important lesson from minority characters type of parable.
On top of that, it's another boring middle-aged white guy goes through midlife crisis.
Middle-aged white guy goes through middle-aged crisis.
It's a whole lot of setup, of complicated, expensive setup for 2 boring-ass stories you didn't need to go through that much effort to do.
And Matt Damon plays a character who essentially is not a character. He could be a mannequin in this film. Mm-hmm. Like, Matt Damon's a fine enough actor. I don't hate him the way some people do. But he's got nothing here. He's just boring white guy. And he has no real depth, and I think that might be kind of the point. He's just a white guy who's never thought about the world before.
Problem with making your protagonist boring is that your protagonist is boring.
Yeah.
I don't know why I have to explain that to Alexander Payne, who's a good writer. I don't understand that.
Yeah, you could make him interesting, have some sort of background. Nope, just boring white dude.
Yeah.
And he discovers that there's actually class struggle even in the miniature world, and that the dollar is being unfairly traded even down there. And he falls in with the ghetto people, and how horribly they're shot, and how horrible their lives are, and how he finally learns to feel something. Screw you, movie. Jeez, I don't need White Guilt, the movie miniature version.
Yeah, you can just make that movie.
Yeah.
there's more than enough of that to go around. You don't need to go through this much effort.
And then there's a twist partway through, which introduces a new element which might be interesting, but isn't.
There's a message in this movie that I do kind of respond to. The idea that the world is always ending, and there's only so much we can do about it, and we got to make the most of the time we have.
Yeah,
I can appreciate that. It's
get to it faster. Please.
Get to it faster. It's too long. It's too expensive. It's too belabored, and it's not funny. Like, you'd think it'd be funny. It sounds like a premise that Mike Judge could have done something great with. Like, I imagine the Mike Judge version of this. I'm like, ooh, that'd be funny.
Yeah.
No, bad movie. But here's the thing. It's just sort of middle bad movie. It didn't hurt me. That's my thing. My list hurt me. So that's my wife.
It's one of those films that feels like it has good intentions, but is actually telling you a bad message.
I can appreciate that.
And that's why it made my list.
Okay.
What's your number 6?
My number 6 is a movie that I'm also surprised isn't higher, but again, they're all tied for number 1. The Emoji Movie.
This is my number 2.
When I accidentally said that The Beauty and the Beast was the most...
There's a lot of overlap between our lists.
When I said The Beauty and the Beast was the most corporate movie of the year, my mistake. I forgot about this, or at least I'm trying to. The Emoji Movie is a movie about emojis. It's a movie...
And apps you can buy today.
Ooh, really? I can buy these right now?
Like Spotify registered, or Just Dance registered.
Ooh. Mm-hmm. The Emoji Movie is a movie... that I hate. And
that nobody wants.
Here's the thing with the Emoji Movie.
Nobody wants the Emoji Movie.
The Emoji Movie ended up having like almost a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. Ultimately, there was one review on Rotten Tomatoes.
Was it Armand White?
No, I don't think it was. There was one review that wasn't even a review. It was just saying whether or not it was appropriate for kids. It shouldn't even qualify as a review. Maybe there were more sense, but when they finally broke 0, that was the one. It was basically like, your kids won't be destroyed if they see it.
But they kind of will because of all of the corporate underhanded messages.
So ignoring that this is just a bizarre, tacky, pointless celebration of emojis, here's the plot.
An emoji?
No. We're not even... No.
Oh, a teenage boy.
Yeah, the teenage boy. Think of this as Inside Out, whereas Inside Out is what happens inside your head as you go through an important, dramatic moment in your life. Emoji Movie is what happens inside your phone as you go through an important, dramatic moment in your life. Here's what happens. A teenager likes a girl at school. Mm-hmm. She sends him a text, and he can't decide which emoji to use. That's it.
That's the drama.
That's the plot. And then the emoji...
And it turns out the emoji he needs to use is a GIF.
Is it? Yeah, that's it. The whole point is that emojis are crap. And they even flat out say by the end, it's like, oh, I get it. It's like, sometimes it's hard to pick just one emotion because you feel a bunch of different things. So you basically just negated the concept of language because you're an inarticulate piece of shit and you don't know how to communicate anything.
This little yellow face says I'm happy today, and then I have one here that means I'm ambivalent.
Now, even this wouldn't have made it the worst thing ever if it was funny, because you can almost say something with that. You can talk about how we were losing things, and there's a satire there. There's a grim satirical version of this that might be funny.
I would love to see the team that put together Sausage Party do something with the emoji.
There's something that could be done with that. Instead, it's just, we're going to go to this app. It's Candy Crush.
Yeah,
Candy Crush is funny, right?
And they play Candy Crush.
You recognize Candy Crush?
They just play it. Like
Candy Crush.
There's no wit to it. They just play a game of Candy Crush.
Candy Crush.
My guess is they figured the kids are going to be in the theater anyway playing Candy Crush on their phones because they're bored as fuck. So they're just going to head them off at the pass and play Candy Crush for you.
God damn it.
Like, it makes sure that the lazy teens are even lazier.
I laughed like 1.5 times. One, when I found out they cast Stephen Wright as a meh emoji, which is just good casting. And I was like, okay, yeah, fair enough.
It's the indifference emoji.
Yeah, that's good casting. I laughed because you thought to do that. And there was another one where Patrick Stewart, who plays Poop, I can't even... Oh, God. He plays Poop.
Okay.
Patrick Stewart plays Poop.
Can we pause on the poop emoji for a second?
Must we?
Yes, because I need to figure this out. The poop emoji. Now, the Japanese word for luck is very similar to the Japanese word for poop. And so I think it is a pun on a Japanese texting system, which is where a lot of these emojis originated.
Poop brings you good luck in some cultures.
There you go.
It actually is. Like,
okay.
That's not a pun on it. That's just actually a thing.
It's actually okay.
So when it comes to America, we're confused.
So it comes to America, we have an emoji for poop, and to us, it's just poop. Now, I don't need a little picture of poop. In fact, I don't ever want to see pictures of poop.
You know,
I want to stay far away from poop. I want to flush poop.
On Twitter, I've been doing this long thread, and I couldn't. It just takes too long. I haven't been able to do it all in one chunk. I'm just reviewing every new movie I saw of the year. And when I got to the emoji movie, I literally wanted to put the poop emoji, but the poop emoji was smiling, and I thought that sent the wrong message. I wanted an angry poop emoji, but I couldn't find it, so I ended up having to write words.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
See, imagine if you had an emoji movie that could give you the adventure of looking for the right emoji to express yourself.
The emoji movie fucking sucks. Let's move on.
Emoji.
What's your number 5? Wait, you already did number 5.
No, actually, my number 5 was Oakja, but we talked about it already. All so what's your number 5?
My number 5, we reviewed it recently on this podcast, Daddy's Home 2.
I didn't see this.
Good for you. You made a smart choice.
I didn't want to.
I didn't want to either, but I had to. Daddy's Home 2 is a spiteful shithead of a movie. Daddy's Home 2 espouses, much like Daddy's Home, the idea that if you're a man and you have feelings, you're funny. That's on you. You knew it when you had feelings. Whoops. And it takes the idea that Mark Wahlberg learned a valuable lesson at the end of Daddy's Home 2, and it just sort of pukes on it. Like, Mel Gibson shows up, and he does the worst things ever. He encourages children to commit acts of sexual assault. He commits children to murder small animals.
This is his character, not Mel Gibson.
I don't know. Maybe he had lived it, but like, like it's just this. We're supposed to like agree that he's going to learn a valuable lesson, blah 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 blah. But the movie thinks it's charming enough that it's going to be family friendly entertainment. The entire thing falls apart on itself, and it's just so completely unfunny. Like, there's one scene that's kind of funny where all of the dads finally find one thing they agree on: no one should touch the thermostat. And they all have this weirdly hyper freak out about it, even though like it's just a couple of degrees on the thermostat. That's actually almost a joke. Everything else is just lame setup. Probably would have been funny if Chevy Chase did it in a vacation movie, but here they just like, and then the lights fall off. So the lights fall off is what you're saying. It's going to happen for like 20 minutes. Oh.
It's interesting that you should bring up Vacation. Now, Vacation came out in a time when comedies were kind of deconstructing that kind of sitcom, like 50s nuclear family sitcom dynamic where the dad of the family is this like masculine, confident provider, but it replaced that character with somebody who was actually very incapable and kind of bungling and dumb.
Well, they all became kind of this like comedy version of The Stepfather, where everyone is chasing down this ideal of family life that they were sold in sitcoms, and yet they're incapable of providing it, and everything explodes. They meant well, but everything dies, and that's funny.
But this was the late 70s and early 80s when it was okay to sort of deconstruct the fact that the nuclear family was exploding. It was a comment. Vacation actually had something behind it.
Sure. Now I think the first like 3 vacations had something behind it.
Now we're just sort of living on this echo of it, wherein the masculine ideal that is presented in this is this horrible, toxic thing that we shouldn't even be acknowledging anymore. And trying to devote yourself to being that is such an unseemly goal. That, being a good father is so much beyond that. And we know this now, and we've moved beyond that. And we've moved beyond it in our movies. And I still see this stripe of comedies coming out wherein we're still sort of looking at it, and we're not doing anything to deconstruct it. We're just showing
nothing left to say.
Men trying to achieve this and eventually kind of achieving it. Not by like coming to terms with anything or realizing that they're not going to have it or changing the way they're parenting. They just get to have that now. And we're celebrating something that we were trying to deconstruct, and it looks like they're trying to reconstruct and declare to the world that, no, the nuclear family's okay.
Here's my thing. Here's what it boils down to.
Even in a movie like Blended, which is supposed to be about that deconstruction, ends up just reinforcing it.
I agree. I think what it boils down to for me is a lot of people think that dumb comedies, many of which are wonderful, that it's an excuse to be dumb, when in fact the best dumb comedies, the best comedies about misbehavior, antics, people who don't know what they're doing, things falling apart, are actually smartly constructed. You can't be dumb and make something smart. Like, you can make something entertaining perhaps, but like when you put a little thought into something like this, you get something really great. When you put no thought into it, you might amuse people who are high or 5 years old. And then everyone else...
Or both.
Please not both. But, like, you're pandering. It's exceptional pandering. And I realize that some people want to be pandered to. Hell, sometimes I want to be pandered to. It's not worth celebrating. I'm not going to say it was good, because it wasn't funny, it hurt my feelings, and you sucked. Sorry, there's so much... I went through so much this year. I went through so much this year. Tell me your number 4. Tell me your number 4.
My number 4, oh golly, if I have to.
What did you do?
I Transformers The Last Night.
Oh, that's my number 1.
Okay. Yeah, you said you went through so much. Tell me your worst movie. Okay, I'm going to talk about Transformers. Let's drag you through the mud again. The Transformers series is, why do critics hate it? Well, because they're terrible.
They're not all equally terrible, though. I'm going to say this right now.
To be fair, I haven't seen the first one, but I have seen the others, and they're all pretty awful.
The first one functions as a movie.
Okay.
The second one is
a mess.
It's just terrible.
It's a remake of the first, but messier and dumber.
The third one fixes some things. It works better. It's certainly in context with the rest of the movies, I think it is at least the second best one. 4 is just big and confusing and loud and screaming at you. And then
for nearly 3 hours.
And then 5 is 4, but angrier, and it really has a low opinion of you.
Well, these have all had a really low opinion of you, and they expect us to sympathize with creeps and horrible people, and the way these films... all action films fetishize violence. But
pretty much.
The way these films fetishize violence, the way it glorifies in that type of visual noise... and expects us to be thrilled by it is an insult, frankly. And it's actually revealing something really unsavory about the filmmakers, that they think that there's something heroic in every single act of destruction. I suppose there's some poetry in that in a Bela Tarr sort of sense. All destruction brings new life.
There's almost like a sort of like the path of excess could lead to the palace of wisdom. And I'm like, you've had 5 movies. Where's the fucking wisdom?
Yeah, there's no wisdom.
There's no point.
Thought. And the type of... people that Michael Bay has decided to make these films about are these very military-minded, super masculine, order-obsessed dimwits.
And I want to make it clear here. We're not anti-military. We're anti-dimwits.
I'm anti-military in the way Michael Bay has decided to fetishize it.
He's making propaganda.
Yeah,
we're rejecting propaganda, and that's reasonable.
Yeah, he wants...
Even if you're for it, you can reject propaganda because it's brainwashing.
He wants you to go into these movies and walk out essentially wanting to join the military. And I don't like that. I don't like that message. I don't like being told that message.
Yeah, because
I don't like Mark Wahlberg playing a misogynist dummy giving me that message. These films are most decidedly misogynistic.
Oh, sure.
Don't give me any of that crap about how but that woman's a scientist or Megan Fox is actually really a skilled mechanic. Yes, those things are in the script, but Michael Bay doesn't film them like they're intelligent.
And Michael Bay doesn't give a shit about that part.
No, he certainly doesn't. He's going to give close-ups of asses and thighs and stuff, and that those visual cues are going to give the audience the idea that we're supposed to objectify these women, and it doesn't matter what they say.
Here's the thing. The heroine of Transformers: The Last Night is supposed to be a historian, really, really smart. She spends most of the movie having things explained to her, being talked down to by a misogynist, and then falling in love with the guy anyway because he's hot. And eventually, what does she accomplish? She shoves a phallic object into a hole.
Yep.
That's what she does. She shoves a sword into a thing, and I'm telling you something, that's right there at the base of the Arthurian legend. That is a penis. That has always been a penis. Talk to any Arthurian lit professor, they'll tell you they know that's a penis. They've always known. Boom.
It's a noble thing to handle a big cock.
I argue... Jesus Christ.
I just had to say it. I'm sorry.
Jesus. I argued when I reviewed Transformers: The Last Night that Transformers: The Last Night isn't everything wrong with Western civilization, but everything wrong with Western civilization is in it. It is representative of the worst of us.
It is the xenophobia,
marginalization, racism, sexism, short attention span, a glorification of ignorance and violence, bland acceptance of propaganda and being pandered to, anger, loudness. You think it's a shitty thing about society? It's in this movie. And on top of that, it's confusingly plotted. The characters are bad and just poorly constructed. It makes no sense. It contradicts the other films in the series. Nothing about this functions. And I'm actually I normally don't care if movies make a lot of money or not. I'm really glad this one finally dropped dramatically in terms of how much money it made, because I don't want more of these. We're getting a Bumblebee movie from the director of Kubo and the Two Strings, and starring Haley Atwell, set in the 80s.
Haley Steinfeld.
I'm sorry, Haley Steinfeld. My bad. Too many Haleys. And I have hopes that maybe that might be a real film. That's all I want. I just want them to be real films that don't espouse awfulness.
It has the promise of being a real film. I think, however, it might be trapped at this point to like the irresponsible noise machine.
Just if they just reboot it, we could be fine. Because we've never seen a live-action Transformers movie that wasn't directed by Michael Bay. Michael Bay is not the only... People only Michael Bay can do this. I refuse to believe that there's no other filmmaker who can make a story about homicidal trucks that turn into big, tall metal people. I refuse to believe that Michael Bay is the only person who can make that good.
Who directed that film Black Dog? Get that guy.
The Patrick Swayze movie?
The Patrick Swayze movie.
I have no idea who made that movie.
It's about big rigs crashing into each other.
I remember it. Get the guy who did Monster Trucks. Monster Trucks was fun.
I
know you expect Monster Trucks to be on our worst film of the year. Monster Trucks knows what it is and is reasonably entertaining.
It's totally fun. It is nowhere near the bottom.
If you were 8 years old, you would have loved that movie.
We've already talked about my 3, 2, and 1.
Oh, Jesus. So, I'm just going to... Okay, let's do this.
So, my number 3 was Beauty and the Beast. My number 2 is the Emoji New Movie. And my number 1 is The Book of Henry. So,
fantastic. My number 4...
What have we not talked about
My number 4 is The Only Living Boy in New York. The latest film from Mark Webb.
Golly.
The director of the 2 amazing Spider-Man movies, who also directed 500 Days of Summer, a movie I rather like.
This is the one about the young man who has an affair with his father's mistress.
Here's the plot of the movie. The son of, I believe he's a billionaire, is upset that he's been friend-zoned, finds out that his father is having an affair, stalks his father's mistress, and convinces, kind of almost blackmails the mistress into sleeping with him so he can destroy his father's life.
Okay.
It's not a thriller. He's supposed to be the sympathetic put-upon protagonist.
And does he fall in love with the mistress, or
no? It's mostly just casual manipulation and Eventually his dad finds out and is destroyed.
Like the Book of Henry, he decides to go about this completely immoral revenge plot, and we're supposed to sympathize with that.
Yeah, whereas
in a warm sort of
Book
way.
of Henry is sort of fascinating about its badness, which is why I put it a little below this. This is just, they have no idea their protagonist is evil. They just have no idea. He's completely unlikable and shitty. And on top of everything, he's also supposed to be the greatest writer ever, because he's been through so much. And he has these long conversations with this J.D. Salinger type, played by Jeff Bridges, in which Jeff Bridges doesn't interact with anyone else. And I thought the whole point was Jeff Bridges was supposed to be a figment of his imagination. Turns out, nope! And in fact, there's a whole twist I'm not going to tell you because it's so stupid. And like, I interviewed Mark Webb about this. I interviewed him about the movie. I had a lot of pointed questions.
Mark Webb, explain yourself, sir.
You know, he was a nice enough person to really have a conversation about it. But I mentioned, like, I thought this was going to turn into a Brian De Palma movie. And he's like, that's interesting. And I'm like, okay. And, like, I asked him, like, I thought Jeff Bridges' character was going to be a figment of his imagination. And Mark Webb said, I think that might have been in an earlier draft.
Oh, jeez, all right. just
made it
stuck
real.
with that one. All right.
The movie is such this bizarre, cataclysmic misfire, and it's so convinced of its own greatness. I feel bad for the people who made this movie, who clearly had no idea what they were doing. It's so sad. Number 3, I'm amazed this didn't make your bottom 10. I know you liked it more than me, but my God, Ghost in the Shell.
Ghost in the Shell is one of my runners-up.
Okay, Ghost in the Shell. Oh, God.
I know a lot of people responded to the racism in this film.
And there's a lot of it!
And there's plenty of it. I was too bored to be offended by its racism. And I think...
What about its sexism?
Oh, all right, fine, that too.
You had the same reaction as I had to Snatch, where it just didn't bother you that much.
I tuned out so early on in this film that when it started to do kind of offensive things, it's like, I've already written the film off. I don't really even care anymore.
There's only one thing I'll say for Ghost in the Shell, which is that the visual effects and production design is kind of neat. But beyond that, every single thing they adapted from this incredible piece of animation that was all about sort of the future of mankind in a technological world and how we're all going to have to evolve and become
machines, essentially.
Well, not just become, that makes it sound cynical, just become bigger than ourselves and expand our horizons, and there's a downside to that and a positive side to that, becomes this really shitty, blasé, two-dimensional, anti-technology westernization screed that's all about, like, literal whitewashing, where they're putting the brains of Japanese people into white bodies, and they don't talk about how culturally fucked up that is, and it's just a catastrophic chaos bullshit bomb of a movie. And it's just, everything about it just makes you wonder, why? Why would you do that? Why would you adapt something and have no concept of why it's worth adapting in the first place? You could have made a shitty movie about a Scarlett Johansson bot who doesn't like being a Scarlett Johansson bot and not ruined Ghost in the Shell. If you're going to change it that much, you're not adapting it. You're just doing your own thing and stealing a title, and the title doesn't have as much cachet in America as you think anyway, because most people who don't watch anime don't know what Ghost in the Shell is. What was the point?
And I have seen Ghost in the Shell. I'm one of the people who's just sort of meh on Ghost in the Shell.
I think it's fantastic. I don't know. Anyway, my number 2, Leatherface,
which is the 6th canonical Chainsaw movie.
I don't know if any of the Texas Chainsaw movies are canonical. They're like Highlander. They all change.
I know Texas Chainsaw 3D is canonical with the first, but none of the others.
Yeah, and I think this is a prequel to the first and none of the others. Leatherface, not to be confused with the third Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie, which was called Leatherface. Leatherface is a prequel about the kids in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre family who were taken away from their mother, sent to a mental institution, broke out with like a pair of Mickey and Mallory Knox knockoffs, and went on a killing spree. That almost makes it sound fun. The thing with this movie, it's just badly acted and cheap and doesn't make a lot of sense. The problem with this movie is that it never...
Focus.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre is... The first one's brilliant. The second one is fascinating and entertaining. I hesitate to call it brilliant, but it's pretty great. All the rest of them are a fucking mess. But there's an entertainment value to all the rest of them, even the worst ones. Even Texas Chainsaw 3D. Yeah, I know it's stupid. Watch it. You can watch that movie.
Texas Chainsaw 3D is a hoot.
Like, you can actually, like, it's got pacing and, like, some fun kills. Like, there's a reason to watch it. Hell, even the new generation But the next generation,
not the next generation.
The next generation is
the next generation is like watching vinegar poured in your eyes.
You ever
It's
wanted
awful.
to see Matthew
Awful.
McConaughey have a shitty cybernetic leg and scream at Renee Zellweger for 2 hours? Yes, you did. I know you. Yes, you did.
I didn't
And
want
this
that.
is
What are you
movie.
talking about? Don't put words in my
This
mouth.
movie is it's makes so many bizarre choices that it's kind of hypnotic. Leatherface plays like someone saw like Wrong Turn 4 and then realized that was like kind of like a knockoff of like the Rob Zombie knockoff of Texas Chainsaw Massacre and tried to figure out from there.
It was Michael Bay, not Rob Zombie.
No, I'm thinking of Rob Zombie. No, I'm sorry. Rob Zombie's like Thousand Corpses.
Oh, okay.
My point is
I guess
that
that was a kind of a Texas Chainsaw
if you took a
knockoff.
knockoff of a knockoff of Texas Chainsaw Massacre and then tried to work backwards and reassemble what you thought Texas Chainsaw Massacre was, you'd get Leatherface.
Oh, jeez.
It's the copy. It's the Michael Keaton in Multiplicity that licks pizza. Like it's. There's nothing about
We
this.
made a
that,
copy from 2.
there's nothing about this that feels like it ever needed to exist. The plot doesn't work. It all builds up to a big twist that's really fucking obvious because there's nothing else the movie can do.
Uh-huh.
It's just this pointless nothing of a movie. It's no reason to watch it. It's the least interesting film in the franchise. It's the most boring film of the franchise. Therefore, I argue it is the worst film in a not particularly good franchise if you look at it as a whole.
The first one's pretty striking.
First one's amazing.
The second
First
one's
one of my favorite
crazy.
movies. Second one's crazy. I think even
The rest all kind of stink.
I think the remake does some things right, like sort of stylistically that I think are kind of creepy and fascinating.
That doesn't make them scarier, but yeah.
If you like the remake, I get why. That's my point.
Okay, fair. Of this generation of horror remakes, it's actually one of the better ones, I suppose.
Yeah, I would say so. But like, yeah, this is just. Why is this? Why you do this? Why do? I don't. You know, here's the damnedest thing. And this is pissing me off. All of these movies make me so upset that by the time I got to Leatherface, I'm spent. All of my anger and all my frustration at how bad this movie is making it sound like it's not the second worst movie of the year. It is. It truly is. I just no longer. I can't be angry for this long, and I'm basically done. So my number one was Transformers: The Last Night. Let's run through your runners-up movies that just hurt you this year.
Well, there were, like I said as we started, this was a really bad year for like just boring sequels and remakes. So I made a list of just all of these forgettable, boring sequels and remakes that I had to sit through. Kingsman: The Golden Circle.
Didn't see it.
The Mummy. These are things.
It's not bad enough to make a list, but it's not good.
These things are like they're just sort of sitting on my brain, waiting to be wiped off.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to not thinking about a lot of these movies ever again. Yeah.
King Arthur: Legend of the Sword.
I missed that.
Good.
Okay.
Ghost in the Shell was on that list.
Okay.
Pirates of the Caribbean: Dead Men Tell No Tales.
That movie left me immediately.
Yeah.
Like the day after I forgot it existed.
Roger Ebert put it a good way once. Some films fall through my brain without hitting any brain cells. You just sort of go in and just pass straight through.
Like $300 million was spent to make no impression whatsoever.
Alien Covenant was kind of a big letdown for me because I was like the single fan of Prometheus in the world.
Michael Fassbender and Michael Fassbender, like together, are so good in this movie that it took it off of my worst list, even the runners-up.
Those two scenes are really terrific. Everything else is just useless, badly structured.
They rescued a bad movie for me. They kept it off, even my runners-up.
And Heaven Help Me, Blade Runner 2049. I thought
Heaven should help you. You're a jerk.
Roger Deakins made a really, really great 3-hour demo reel. It is amazing production design and great, great photography and acting of characters that I don't care about.
Well, it made my top 10, so there you go. My runners-up. Phoenix Forgotten, another one I've forgotten about. The most by-the-numbers, pointless, like found footage alien movie you're likely to see. Rings made that list.
Okay.
Chips.
Didn't see Chips.
You lucky son of a bitch. Chips is a bad movie. Chips has a couple of good motorcycle stunts, but it's mostly just unfunny jokes and racism and sexism and ageism, and it's bad. The Babysitter has a great performance by Samara Weaving as a babysitter who you find out, like, when the kid goes to sleep, she's like sacrificing people and like the downstairs. Good setup. Terrible movie. Just a cacophony of bad decisions and plot
If the late
holes.
great Toby Hooper were alive, he should have done that movie.
Oh, I think Joe Dante could have done this.
Or Joe
movie.
Dante,
any horror filmmaker with some humor, and it said they got McG. The Nut Job 2, Nutty by Nature, technically better than The Nut Job, Still really bad.
Yeah, but the nut job was like getting hit in the face.
The Snowman. A lot of people called The Snowman one of the worst movies of the year. I'm putting it in the runners-up because it's not well made. It's not bottom 10 material. It's just a poorly put together, lame, forgettable serial killer movie with plot holes out the butt.
I know the poster is what is really kind of struck a chord with
the poster is a great meme.
The cynical meme creators.
It's not even important in the movie.
I saw somebody take the little snowman drawing and just dress it like Aquaman. It's like a little bizarro, right? Why not?
Friend requests, been by honorable mentions for reasons already described. And then lastly, I normally don't pick on like straight to video stuff. Because I think they've already got enough strikes against them. Why put them on a bottom 10 list? But I think it deserves an honorable mention. Tom and Jerry, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is one of the most bizarre...
No, something like that needs to be taken down. Because we don't need more of that.
They took the Gene Wilder Willy Wonka and they remade it, but now Tom and Jerry are running around like idiots.
The Rosencrantz and Guildenstern of this movie.
Yeah, it's infinitely worse than it sounds. It would have made my bottom 5 worst movies of the year if I didn't think it was already a huge punchline and we didn't need to knock it down any further. But seriously, it's a huge mistake of a thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
There are some movies that have been notorious throughout the year that I thought weren't that bad. Geostorm is,
entertainingly bad.
Yeah, it's like... I suppose a little dumber than a Roland Emmerich film, but no less entertaining.
Anyone who picks on Valerian and City of a Thousand Planets, I don't understand you. I don't understand you.
How could you not be dazzled by Valerian? Bright was getting a lot of really bad press. I watched Bright. Bright's fine. I mean, it's not nearly as good as something like Alien Nation, which is clearly cribbing very heavily from. But,
I just plain didn't see it.
It's just fine. It's a fine film.
I'm trying to think, what were the other ones people just easy to take cheap shots at?
I was going to mention Valerian.
The Emoji Movie is on there. Suburbicon. You didn't mention Suburbicon.
Suburbicon... Yeah, I mean, it is a mess. It's a mess of a film, and it was about to make my long list.
50 Shades Darker. Did either of us see that?
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah?
I saw it. I reviewed it.
Oh, The Dark Tower? I didn't
see The Dark Tower.
I think if I was a fan of the books, I know a lot of fans of the books are mad at what happened to it, but as someone who just watched the movie, it's a YA fantasy movie that's adequate. Idris Elba's really good in it.
Lord knows we've had plenty of those.
Yeah, it adds nothing, which has got to be a goddamn shame. I can't imagine if they'd adapted something I loved and made something just that generic. That'd be really fucking frustrating. But it's okay. I've seen a lot worse. I don't know. So that's it.
That's the worst of the year.
That's 2017. We're done with you, 2017. You're dead to us.
Get out of the room. Just leave.
Please. Bring back Get Out. Get Out was actually pretty good. Yeah. So that's it. And thank you, everybody, for listening to that.
We will have to forego letters this episode because I'm on a time crunch right now.
Next week is going to be a short episode otherwise, so we're going to catch up on our letters.
Yeah.
Because next week, we're going to review a movie of your choice and a double feature of our choice, going back to our usual system. That poll is up on Schmelville right now, and we're going to... This week, we're going to take away all the newer stuff that tends to dominate the winners because we want to sort of spread it out a bit. And your choices are older, more esoteric, maybe even obscure, depending on your knowledge of cinema. Your choices are Earth versus the Spider, which is about Earth fighting a spider.
The whole planet.
Which is Endless Love, which is about love.
That doesn't end. It was remade recently, strangely enough.
Super weird. The Giant Behemoth, which is about a giant behemoth. It's Super Fuzz, which is about a cop with superpowers in Italy. And Teenage Caveman, which is about a 40-year-old caveman pretending to be a teenager.
And evidently they had a lot of pomade in prehistoric times.
So these are mostly older movies. I think the most recent one is 1981. A lot of them are from the 50s. So you can vote for that on the Schmelville fan page. Sign up if you haven't already. And the only new release I think we're going to be reviewing next week is Insidious: The Last Key.
Yeah.
So that's going to leave us a lot of room to catch up on your letters, start the new year off right, and really thank you everybody for writing in. You can email us criticallyacclaimedfans@gmail.com. And we will read as many of your letters as we can. We have to curate them a little bit because we get a lot. And thank you very much for writing. You can also follow me on Twitter at William Bibbiani.
I'm at Witney Seibold. That's Witney with no H and Seibold with an EI.
And we also have another podcast called Canceled Too Soon. That is available separately from the Schmoes Know network.
That's our own thing.
But you can find it on iTunes, Stitcher, a bunch of other places as well. And this week we're reviewing the Heath Ledger, Vera Farmiga, Braveheart meets Hercules: The Legendary Journeys knockoff, Roar.
From 1997.
Which actually has a lot of things in common with Highlander, including weird immortals and Romans and...
Big, awkward sword fighting.
Yeah, a lot really just emo, depressed heroes who... Yeah, it's kind of like a good double feature, except it's Roar. And... It's an odd footnote in Heath Ledger and Vera Farmiga's career, and you might want to check that out. In fact, I hope you do, because it's our podcast, and we want it to do well.
If I get to talk to Vera Farmiga, I'm definitely going to bring it up.
Oh, how could you not? Also, you should bring up, apparently, I think she raises... She's a very voracious knitter, I've heard.
Okay.
So you should talk to her about knitting.
Okay.
I think she raises, like, her own animals and, like, gets yarn from them. That's what I heard. I don't know.
She has her own wool-producing creatures.
That's what I heard. I don't know how true that is.
Okay.
That could be total rumor. I don't know. Weird rumor to start.
Yeah.
Totally banal, nice, pleasant rumor.
I hear you raise wool. Tell me about that.
Anyway, so that's it for Critically Acclaimed. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll see you next week, and hope you have a Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Never forget, everyone's a critic.
I want to go to the midnight show. I'm sorry, what?